Chapter 672. Thinking of this, Zhong Xiaohua mysteriously said, "Second brother, don't worry. Wait until we kill all these blood wolves, then I'll make your dream come true." How could Zhong Xiaohu believe her? He only curled his lips and said, "I know, Xiaohua, concentrate on killing the wolves. There should be a limit to how much you can comfort your second brother." Zhong Xiaohua smiled and did not speak. The two brothers, Zhong Xiaohua and Zhong Xiaohu, had not seen each other for 4 to 5 years. They both thought that the other had met with an accident. Now that they saw each other again, they were naturally excited and talked more. In particular, Zhong Xiaohua was multitasking. While continuously using Chasing Dream to kill the blood wolves, she was also chatting with Zhong Xiaohu. Unexpectedly, she did not put the Blood Wolf King in her heart. At first, the Blood Wolf King did not care and only treated it as an interesting pastime. However, as time passed, more and more blood wolves were killed by Zhong Xiaohua, and the Blood Wolf King gradually realized that something was wrong. The Blood Wolf King looked up to the sky and howled. The remaining blood wolves received the order and moved, surrounding Zhong Xiaohua from all directions. Seeing this, Zhong Xiaohua was overjoyed. How could he be afraid of these blood wolves? Previously, when he had just entered the Yulan Great Grasslands, he had already figured out the weaknesses of the blood wolves. After hunting for a while, he became even more confident. However, he did not panic as he took half a step back and returned to Zhong Xiaohu's side. Soon after, he sat down with his legs crossed. Holding a yuan stone in his hand, he wholeheartedly controlled Chasing Dream to protect the surrounding 10 feet area. Any blood wolf that entered this 10 feet area would immediately be assassinated by Chasing Dream. The Blood Wolf King became a little impatient after seeing that its attacks were not successful. It growled again, and the wolf pack's attack changed again. Dozens of huge blood wolves leaped out from the wolf pack and pounced on Zhong Xiaohua and the others from all directions. At this time, Zhong Xiaohua's divine sense could not go very far, but it could only go within 10 feet. Every movement was within the range of his divine sense. Although there were many blood wolves, how could their movements be faster than his divine sense? Like a dozen bolts of lightning, the heads of the blood wolves were pierced through like tofu by Zhu Meng. The corpses of the blood wolves fell to the ground, and Zhu Meng circled around a few more times before stabbing the other blood wolves to death. Good. Zhong Xiaohu, who was watching the battle from the side, could not help but exclaim. Hearing second brother's praise, Zhong Xiaohua could not help but smile bitterly in his heart. He had underestimated the blood wolf pack. Just killing dozens of blood wolves seemed easy, but it consumed a lot of divine sense and a lot of qi. Right now, his divine sense was mostly absorbed by the silver eye of unknown origin. Even his divine sense that was gradually recovering was also absorbed by it. Although he was holding a primordial stone in his hand, the amount of yuan qi he could absorb was limited. If it was just like before, it should not be a problem. However, the attack just now made him see his own weakness. He could either rely on the power of the seal to defend or use the method of guerrilla warfare to achieve his goal of killing all the blood wolves. Of course, he also knew that if he could directly kill the Blood Wolf King, the blood wolves that were surrounding him would disperse. However, he had been chased by Huang Feng for the past few days. His heart was filled with anger. Now that he saw second brother injured by the blood wolves, he could not help but be ruthless. He wanted Chasing Dream to take advantage of the situation and leave the thousands of blood wolves behind. Therefore, he did not want to directly face the Blood Wolf King for the time being. After thinking for a while, Zhong Xiaohua said, "Second brother, you stay here first. Don't worry, I will be back soon." Zhong Xiaohu nodded and said, "You go first. Leave the jade water sword behind. I can hold on for a while." Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, "I still need to use the jade water sword. You just watch." Then, Zhong Xiaohu was somewhat puzzled and said, "Then how do I block the blood wolves?" "Haha, second brother, you don't need to. Just sit there and watch the battle." Zhong Xiaohua laughed loudly and leaped into the air, throwing himself into the midst of the blood wolves. Chasing Dream followed Zhong Xiaohua and flew into the depths of the blood wolves. In just a few moments, another few blood wolves were beheaded. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua leave, The blood wolves at the side saw an opportunity and pounced at Zhong Xiaohu. Zhong Xiaohu was also shocked. He wanted to dodge elsewhere, but before he could move, the blood wolf that was pouncing over was blocked by an invisible light barrier. It could no longer pounce in front of him. Hey! Zhong Xiaohu was even more surprised. How many mysterious divine arts does this little brother of mine have? Since there was no danger to his life, Zhong Xiaohu naturally turned his attention to Zhong Xiaohua. At this moment, Zhong Xiaohua was like a wolf in a flock of sheep. He used the levitation technique to drift left and right. Wherever he went, Chasing Dream was invincible. He did not care about the Bloodwolves' attacks at all and stabbed at the Bloodwolves' vital points from unimaginable angles. Although the Bloodwolves were innately valiant and rather courageous, they were still ferocious beasts with intelligence. This was the first time they were being killed by someone. After a long time, it was inevitable that they would be afraid. In the end, after a while, wherever Zhong Xiaohua went, the Bloodwolves avoided him and did not dare to attack. Its sharpness formed a 30-foot gap around Zhong Xiaohua and none of the Bloodwolves dared to cross it. Although Zhong Xiaohua used the levitation technique and jumped into the Bloodwolves when they were not on guard, after killing a few more, the Bloodwolves were even more careful. Zhong Xiaohua almost did not have any chance. Thus, Zhong Xiaohua was a little tired. The one-sided massacre just now had very well alleviated his hatred towards the Bloodwolves that besieged Zhong Xiaohu. With him around, Zhong Xiaohu and Chang'e would not be in any danger. Roughly calculating, the number of Bloodwolves that died under Chasing Dream's sword was already around 400 to 500, which accounted for more than half of the Bloodwolves in the pack. Otherwise, the remaining Bloodwolves would not be so afraid. This kind of incomparable massacre really made Zhong Xiaohua feel very bored. Maybe it's time to end it. Zhong Xiaohua turned to look at the Bloodwolf King that was standing far away. The Bloodwolf King at this time was also constantly roaring, wanting to command the Bloodwolves to surround Zhong Xiaohua. Unfortunately, the Bloodwolves were all frightened and did not listen to its command at all. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua looking at it, the Bloodwolf King also signaled that this was the time for the final battle and howled to the sky. The surrounding Bloodwolves all understood the Bloodwolf King's meaning and consciously opened up a path. At the end of the path was Zhong Xiaohua, who kept the Jade Water Sword. The Bloodwolf King proudly walked through the path with its head held high, as if it was being admired by thousands of people. When it arrived in front of Zhong Xiaohua, it stared at Zhong Xiaohua's eyes. At this time, Zhong Xiaohua also stared at the Bloodwolf King with interest. The Bloodwolf King's physique was obviously 3 times larger than an ordinary Bloodwolf. Its tall body looked exceptionally majestic in the mountain wind. Suddenly, the Bloodwolf King's thick hind legs stomped, and its entire body was like a huge hill crashing towards Zhong Xiaohua. Zhong Xiaohua's body was tall and thin. Facing the Bloodwolf King that was a head taller than her, it was obvious that she was frail. The Bloodwolf King pounced in front of Zhong Xiaohua, and its thick front claws swiped like a bolt of lightning. Just based on this claw, among all the disciples who were undergoing the Orchid Evening refinement, perhaps only the inner disciples could dodge this attack. However, this move was far from posing any threat to Zhong Xiaohua. Zhong Xiaohua raised her fist to meet the attack, nimbly dodging the sharp wolf claws, and her fist landed on the soft fur of the wolf claws. With a peng sound, the Bloodwolf King, who was caught off guard, was sent flying back. The Bloodwolf King was also valiant. It lost its balance and struggled in the air, but it couldn't avoid the fate of being thrown to the ground. After landing, the Bloodwolf King roared and immediately got up, pouncing over again. This time, Zhong Xiaohua didn't use her bare hands. Instead, she shook the Jade Water Sword, and a 2-foot sword ray shot out, piercing towards the Bloodwolf King's throat. The Bloodwolf King was already prepared. Although it was inconvenient to move in the air, it blocked the sword ray with its front claws. With a dang sound, it was the sound of metal colliding with stone. The Bloodwolf King's hard claws actually deflected the invincible sword ray. Hey! Zhong Xiaohua was a little surprised. I didn't expect the Bloodwolf King to have such an ability. It seems that even the inner disciples of the Lingering Fragrance Peak would have to put in a lot of effort to deal with it. Thus, Zhong Xiaohua pulled herself together and went up to fight with the Bloodwolf King. It was a very strange scene. Hundreds of blood wolves quietly surrounded a high slope. On the high slope, a tall and thin young man wielded his sword like a dragon as he fought with a huge golden blood wolf. Not far away, among the wolf pack, there was a tall man half huddled on the ground, nervously watching the scene. Beside him, there was a pretty girl lying quietly. Zhong Xiaohua and the Blood Wolf King fought back and forth for the time it took to brew a cup of tea. There was no clear winner or loser. Just as Zhong Xiaohua wanted to change her move, the Blood Wolf King pounced over and waved its front claws, attacking the left side of Zhong Xiaohua's chest. Zhong Xiaohua's jade water sword pierced the wolf's claws. At this moment, the Blood Wolf King suddenly opened its bloody mouth and spat out a mouthful of air towards Zhong Xiaohua's chest. Zhong Xiaohua was obviously stunned. What kind of move is this? Just as Zhong Xiaohua was surprised, the breath arrived in front of him. Zhong Xiaohua swept it with his divine sense, and his face suddenly changed. The heaven-earth yuan qi in front of him seemed to have undergone a drastic change. The Blood Wolf King had spat out something that looked like a blade, and it was heading straight for his face. In a hurry, Zhong Xiaohua made a gesture and immediately used the familiar earth escape. Zhong Xiaohua's figure disappeared from the spot and then appeared behind the Blood Wolf King and Zhong Xiaohu in surprise. Hee hee. Zhong Xiaohua smiled. I knew this Blood Wolf King must have some trump card. Zhong Xiaohua had never heard of the ability to spit out wind blades, but presumably, the Blood Wolf King had not mastered it. The strength of the wind blades was also very weak. Otherwise, at such a close distance, Zhong Xiaohua would have been seriously injured. -3. Chapter 673. The Blood Wolf King's wind blade was out of Zhong Xiaohua's expectations, but it was also within Zhong Xiaohua's expectations. However, he did not expect that the Blood Wolf King would not use this kind of colorless and silent killing technique. This wind blade was really amazing. At first, it was like the sound of the wind. Following the Blood Wolf King's growl, it only started to move when it was close. If not for the help of Zhong Xiaohua's divine sense, how could he know that this wind-like thing could actually hurt him? Zhong Xiaohua did not have time to turn his head. In his divine sense, the wind blade actually flew out 10 feet away, followed by the wail of a blood wolf. It must have been accidentally injured by the wind blade. Listening to the sound, it was already 40 to 50 feet away. To be able to have such a strong force from such a long distance, it really made Zhong Xiaohua feel a little scared. Good. Fortunately, young master's character is good and has always been releasing his divine sense. Otherwise, TSK, at least his face would be disfigured. When the Blood Wolf King saw that the wind blade did not work, he was also stunned on the spot. In his impression, this wind blade consummate skill had always been effective in one strike, and it had only failed when facing the two kings of the Yulan Grand Canyon. However, this unfamiliar intruder in front of him actually. Seeing that the Blood Wolf King had stopped attacking, Zhong Xiaohua was slightly surprised, then he laughed. Good. I'll let you experience this young master's methods. After speaking, he flew up. The Jade Water Sword's sword light spat out another 2 feet and directly pierced towards the Blood Wolf King. The Blood Wolf King was stunned for a moment. Seeing that the sword light was about to reach him, he did not dodge. He simply opened his mouth and shot out another invisible wind blade. Zhong Xiaohua also wanted to test the power of the wind blade. He did not dodge and directly pierced the wind blade that was flying towards him. It was strange. The wind blade was clearly a wind-like object, but when the sword gleam pierced it, there was an indescribable sound. Then, the sword gleam suddenly retracted and was suppressed into the body of the Jade Water Sword. Ayo! Zhong Xiaohua was shocked. The Jade Water Sword was given to her second brother. She didn't want it to be broken now. Thinking of this, Zhong Xiaohua hurriedly pulled back her sword, not daring to use her sword to directly receive the wind blade. At this time, the wind blade was already close to her. Zhong Xiaohua stretched out her hand and simulated her true qi into her palm. With a sidestep, she dodged the wind blade and sent out another air-splitting palm. Unfortunately, this time, the wind blade showed the characteristics of the wind. The air-splitting palm's inner qi actually flashed and could not hit the wind blade at all. Hey! Zhong Xiaohua was a little curious. This is interesting. Then, Zhong Xiaohua put away the jade water sword. Together with her right hand's middle finger and index finger, she pointed forward. The chasing dream that had been hovering in mid-air made a Z sound. It was as if it was going to tear through the air and pierce towards the Blood Wolf King's throat. The Blood Wolf King had already seen the power of the chasing dream. At this time, seeing that the small sword actually made a sound, how could he not know that Zhong Xiaohua was using her full strength? The Blood Wolf King was not afraid of the Jade Water Sword's sword light. Not only could it block the wind blade, it could even block its own sharp claws. However, this small sword did not seem to be that simple. Just from seeing that it had pierced through the Blood Wolf King's head like tofu, it did not dare to rashly try. Sure enough, when the chasing dream came close, the Blood Wolf King did not use its front claws to block it. Instead, it twisted its body and that thick tail was like a huge shadow. With a pa sound, it slapped the small sword from top to bottom. Seeing this, Zhong Xiaohua slightly frowned. After seeing the Blood Wolf King's sturdy claws, she did not dare to be too careless. With a slight movement of her fingers, the small sword suddenly stopped in the air. Then, the tip of the sword went up and with a su sound, it met the Blood Wolf King's tail. Bang! A muffled sound rang out as the two collided. Zhong Xiaohua's divine sense was shaken, and the small sword was almost out of control. It swayed and fell to the ground. The Blood Wolf King also let out a low growl, and a few drops of blood dripped from its tail. It seemed to have suffered a minor injury. Zhong Xiaohua frowned and secretly said, "This Blood Wolf King is indeed not ordinary. Since the chasing dream made its move, other than being caught due to its lack of power, this is the first time it has been struck down by force. What should I do?" Zhong Xiaohua could not go against the Blood Wolf King again. However, right after, Zhong Xiaohua's fingers moved again. The chasing dream jumped up from the dust and directly pierced towards the Blood Wolf King's throat. The Blood Wolf King did not dare to hesitate. Since its tail was pierced by the small sword, it could not be careless about the vital point of its throat. The Blood Wolf King twisted its body and opened its mouth. Whoosh, another wind blade was spat out. Zhong Xiaohua also secretly nodded. Previously, they had been testing each other for a long time. Ordinary moves were not effective. At this time, they could only compete with each other's divine sense. Thus, Zhong Xiaohua also focused. She poured her divine sense into the small sword and faced the wind blade head-on. Poof! The small sword seemed to have pierced into a ball of soft cotton. It did not exert any force. Zhong Xiaohua urged her divine sense and pushed the small sword forward a little. The Blood Wolf King was also stunned. It opened its mouth and shot out another wind blade. The chasing dream could not withstand it and was pushed back in an instant. Zhong Xiaohua pointed her finger and the small sword turned around to get rid of the wind blade. Then, it dived into the Blood Wolf King's mouth and stabbed again. Seeing that the wind blade was effective, the Blood Wolf King was no longer nervous and spat out 2 wind blades in a row. Damn! Zhong Xiaohua was speechless. Before she could command the small sword to change the angle, the Blood Wolf King also raised its head and shot out 3 wind blades in a row from different angles to block Zhong Xiaohua's escape route. The 3 wind blades were directly aimed at different vital points on Zhong Xiaohua's body. The one who strikes first gains the advantage. Even the Blood Wolf King understood this principle. Zhong Xiaohua was surprised. Was the Blood Wolf King a human or a beast? It actually knew the art of war. However, he was confident that he could dodge the attack. He leaped into the air, but before he could stabilize himself in the air, the Blood Wolf King launched a few more wind blades at him. The wind blades were aimed at several vital points on his body without any hesitation. It can't be. Zhong Xiaohua was shocked. He had forgotten that he was in the air, exposing all the vital points on his body. Wouldn't that make him a moving target? Seeing the wind blades flying towards him, Zhong Xiaohua did not care about the elegance of a peerless expert and somersaulted down. The Blood Wolf King took advantage of the situation and became even more unreasonable. Puff, puff, puff. Another 3 wind blades were shot at the place where Zhong Xiaohua landed, blocking Zhong Xiaohua's escape route. Then, The Blood Wolf King raised its head and roared, opening its mouth wide. Whoosh! The wind blades were bigger than the previous ones and they were shot towards Zhong Xiaohua's chest. This guy is really vicious and merciless. No wonder he's a king. Zhong Xiaohua was in the air, looking at the wind blades coming from above and below. His heart was slightly flustered. Most of his previous opponents were martial artists. The martial arts that Zhong Xiaohua had learned were more than enough. If it did not work, he could use his strength to subdue his opponents. Moreover, the divine powers that he had learned for the time being were unfathomable. He had an advantage in battle. Even when he met Huang Feng not long ago, he only relied on his speed and claws to tear his throat. He did not use any other techniques. Now that he saw the Blood Wolf King's ability, Zhong Xiaohua understood that there was always someone better than him in this world. Huang Feng was not without powerful techniques, but because she was pregnant with little Martin, she did not want to harm her body too much. Therefore, she frequently used simple claws. If Huang Feng knew how to use wind blades, he would have died long ago. The water in Jianghu was really deep. In a flash, Zhong Xiaohua thought a lot, but he still had to dodge the wind blades in front of him. He moved his body and breathed, circulating the little amount of true qi in his meridians smoothly. His divine sense carefully identified the speed and gaps of the wind blades. In almost impossible places, he moved his body several times to avoid them. When the wind blades flew past, Zhong Xiaohua's body was already covered in cold sweat. It's all thanks to Yellow Wind. Under its relentless pursuit these past few days, my Imperial Wind technique has really made great progress. Not to mention other things, just the control of my movements has become much more precise. Ayo, this Blood Wolf King is really despicable. Xiaoxia had just dodged, but it did not rest and shot out another wind blade. Do you not need to pay for these wind blades? Fortunately, at this time, he was close to the ground. Helpless, Zhong Xiaohua plunged into the ground. However, just as he entered the ground, Zhong Xiaohua felt that something was wrong. He had escaped, but what about second brother and Chang'e? He did not have much time to think, and immediately escaped. Sure enough, when the Blood Wolf King saw Zhong Xiaohua avoid the battle, it immediately shot a wind blade at Zhong Xiaohu. Zhong Xiaohua panicked. But no matter how fast he was, he couldn't be faster than the wind blade. He watched as the wind blade flew over. Inside the restriction, Zhong Xiaohu did not know the danger inside, nor did he know that the wind blade was shot at him. He only saw the Blood Wolf King opening his mouth and yawning. His brother inexplicably popped out of the ground and looked at him nervously. Did something happen here? Suddenly, just around Zhong Xiaohu, there was a slight shake, and even some light blue brilliance flashed. About 4 feet around him, there were some ripples. What is this? Zhong Xiaohu was puzzled. In the distance, Zhong Xiaohua saw that the restriction was not broken by the Blood Wolf King's wind blades, and his heart was slightly relieved. However, even if it could not be broken once, it did not mean that it could not be broken many times. The Heaven and Earth Yuan Qi in the Jade Talisman was limited and could not be replenished by the Heaven and Earth Yuan Qi. As long as the Blood Wolf King attacked repeatedly, it was bound to be broken. Zhong Xiaohua knew that from this moment on, he could no longer hide and could only face the difficulties head-on. Shortly after, Zhong Xiaohua took out a jade talisman from her bosom and gently crushed it. A light green protective barrier immediately enveloped Zhong Xiaohua's entire body. This was the first time Zhong Xiaohua had used a defensive jade talisman on herself. By the time Zhong Xiaohua crushed the jade talisman, the Blood Wolf King's wind blades were already flying towards her. -3. Chapter 674. Seeing how ruthless the Blood Wolf King was, Zhong Xiaohua's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. Just now, he had killed too many Blood Wolf Kings, so he couldn't help but feel compassion. But now that the wind blades were constantly shooting at the protective barrier, the barrier was getting thinner and thinner. He knew that today was not the day to be kind. Letting go of the Blood Wolf King's wishful thinking would only bring disaster to himself. Therefore, he laughed and said, "The Blood Wolf King is only SOSO. Do you think I only have one jade talisman?" Then, He took out another jade talisman and gently crushed it to strengthen the protective barrier. Then, another jade talisman appeared in his hand. It was Zhong Xiaohua's best weapon, the dragon binding ring. Now that Zhong Xiaohua had a defensive barrier, he temporarily ignored the Bloodwolf King's wind blades. He threw the dragon binding ring in his hand into the air. The dragon binding ring grew in the wind until it was the same size as the Bloodwolf King. Inside the protective shield, Zhong Xiaohua secretly wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. Alas, fortunately, the Bloodwolf King is not that big. If it were bigger, Maizhen Qi would not be enough. Zhong Xiaohua rested for a moment and pointed his finger again. The dragon binding ring silently flew towards the Bloodwolf King. When the Bloodwolf King saw Zhong Xiaohua throwing out the dragon binding ring, it was shocked. While it was shooting wind blades at Zhong Xiaohua, it also spat a few mouthfuls of qi at the dragon binding ring. However, Zhong Xiaohua controlled the dragon binding ring to not collide with the wind blades, so the wind blades missed. Seeing the dragon binding ring flying closer, the Bloodwolf King panicked. It sent out a few more wind blades, but they were like clay oxen entering the sea. It quickly dodged to the side. Unfortunately, the dragon binding ring was like a maggot. No matter how it dodged, it was steadily aimed at its head. The Bloodwolf King was even more panicked. With a low roar, it leaped into the air and ran straight into the wolf pack. The wolves received the order from the Bloodwolf King and started to run. For a moment, the entire slope was in chaos. The Bloodwolf King actually wanted to take advantage of the chaos to escape. Damn Tilda, Zhong Xiaohua laughed. It was really shameful for the Bloodwolf King's wolf character. If it was too late, it would attack with all its might. But if it couldn't win, it would immediately escape. It even used its own subordinates as cover. However, the Bloodwolf King actually used wind blades to attack Zhong Xiaohu. This made Zhong Xiaohua very angry. Since she already had the intention to kill it, how could she let it go? Zhong Xiaohua's figure flew straight to the place where the Bloodwolf King disappeared. Although the Bloodwolf King's escape speed was extremely fast, Zhong Xiaohua cultivated the Imperial Wind technique while being chased by the yellow wind. It was naturally easy to deal with it now. When Zhong Xiaohua found the Bloodwolf King covered by the pack of wolves, she couldn't help but become angrier. The Bloodwolf King was really vicious. It seemed that it didn't give up and actually quietly moved towards Zhong Xiaohu's direction. Zhong Xiaohua gritted her teeth and flew to Zhong Xiaohu's side, blocking the Bloodwolf King's path. The Bloodwolf King saw that its plot was exposed and growled. The pack of wolves received the order and rushed towards Zhong Xiaohua. As for the Bloodwolf King itself, it turned around and wanted to escape. How could Zhong Xiaohua let it go? She stretched out her hand and took out a few light red jade talismans. She shook her hand and shot them at the Bloodwolf King. Unfortunately, the Bloodwolf King dodged and all of the jade talismans missed and hit the other wolves. A faint fire appeared and several wolves cried out in pain. For a moment, the scene became even more chaotic. Some of the smarter wolves quickly lay down on the ground and tried to extinguish the fire. However, they couldn't do so no matter how hard they tried. The burning wolves fled and passed the fire to the wolves next to them. Not long after, many of the wolves were caught in the fire. The wolves that were on fire earlier screamed miserably as they were burned to death by the fire. The rest of the wolves were even crazier. Seeing this scene, they immediately retreated and distanced themselves from the burning wolves. At this time, Zhong Xiaohua didn't have the time to watch the development of the situation. He didn't dare to use the fire talisman because he was afraid that it would cause the wolves to panic and lead the fire to the Yulan Prairie. Since he had already used it, he needed to quickly get rid of the Bloodwolf King and then deal with the aftermath. The retreat of the wolves also gave Zhong Xiaohua some convenience. The order of the Bloodwolf King couldn't be heard by the frenzied wolves. Zhong Xiaohua could easily see the Bloodwolf King fleeing in a hurry. With a low whistle, Zhong Xiaohua activated the Imperial Wind technique and rushed to the top of the Bloodwolf King. With a wave of her hand, the dragon binding ring fell from the sky. This was a high slope. Without the help of the wolves, even if the Bloodwolf King fled, it couldn't outrun the speed of the spiritual sense. After a while, the dragon binding ring was firmly wrapped around the Bloodwolf King's neck. Zhong Xiaohua didn't delay and formed a hand seal. The dragon binding ring was large but small, tightly wrapped around the Bloodwolf King's neck. Then, he ruthlessly pointed with his hand. With a light catcher sound, the Bloodwolf King's neck was immediately broken by the dragon binding ring. A stream of blood flowed out from the Bloodwolf King's mouth and it immediately died on the spot. At this time, Zhong Xiaohua also fell from the sky. The dragon binding ring consumed too much spiritual sense and Jin Qi. Zhong Xiaohua didn't dare to use it because he was afraid that even if he killed the Bloodwolf King, his body would run out of Jin Qi. Then, wouldn't he die in the mouths of the wolves? Zhong Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He reluctantly used his remaining Jin Qi to escape into the ground. With 2 primordial stones in his hand, he quickly recovered his Jin Qi. However, before he could escape into the ground, the remaining Jin Qi in his meridians wasn't enough to support the escape technique. The hard ground forced him out of the ground. Zhong Xiaohua was shocked. He looked around and saw that the surrounding bloodwolves were still in a mess and didn't notice him. He quickly hid in a bush and lay there to absorb Jin Qi. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the Jin Qi in his meridians was replenished. Only then did Zhong Xiaohua's heart feel at ease. Worried about his second brother's situation, he didn't dare to stay any longer and quickly got up. Looking at the Bloodwolf King that was strangled to death by the dragon binding ring, Zhong Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. Fortunately, he had successfully refined the dragon binding ring before coming to the Valley Orchid dusk. Otherwise, even if he could escape today, his second brother and Chang'e would be in trouble. Thinking about the yellow wind that was even more powerful than the Bloodwolf King, Zhong Xiaohua truly knew that he was dancing on the tip of a knife a few days ago. Then, Zhong Xiaohua patted Little Black who was sleeping in his arms and said with a smile, "It's all thanks to you, little guy. Otherwise, this young master would have already become a wandering soul under your mother's claws. If I don't treat you well in the future, wouldn't I be letting you down?" Zhong Xiaohua walked to the Bloodwolf King's corpse and bent down to pick up the corpse that was even taller than himself. He walked up the high slope in large strides and when he reached the highest point, he looked around. Fortunately, although the Yuan Qi in the Valley Orchid was abundant, it wasn't enough to support the flames. After the remaining bloodwolves were burned to death for 2 minutes, the flames no longer spread outside. At this moment, the bloodwolves were somewhat scattered, but they still circled around in 2s and 3s. They didn't go far and were probably waiting for the Bloodwolf King's orders. Seeing this, Zhong Xiaohua raised his hand and raised the Bloodwolf King's corpse above his head. He opened his mouth and let out a long howl. The sound shook the surroundings and attracted all the bloodwolves that were still alive. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua raise the Bloodwolf King's corpse, the eyes of the bloodwolves couldn't help but reveal fear. Zhong Xiaohua didn't waste time with them and shouted loudly, "Hey! If you don't leave now, when will you?" All the bloodwolves' 4 legs trembled and they immediately clamped their tails. Like dogs that had lost a fight, they were about to disperse. At this moment, suddenly, not far away, a bloodwolf let out a low howl. It raised its head to look at Zhong Xiaohua and the Bloodwolf King's corpse in his hands and slowly ran up the high slope. "What is this?" Zhong Xiaohua was shocked. He immediately took out the jade water sword from his bosom and stared at the bloodwolf that was running over. The bloodwolf ran to the front, but it didn't move forward. It only bent its body, bent its legs, and slightly lowered its head. The surrounding bloodwolves also listened and obediently stood there. Zhong Xiaohua was very puzzled. What is this? For a moment, one person and one wolf stood there in silence. After the time it took to smoke a cigarette, the bloodwolf remained in the same position and didn't change. Even the surrounding bloodwolves quietly stood there without moving, as if they were waiting for something. Zhong Xiaohua scratched his head and whispered, "Brother Wolf, what are you playing at? What do you mean by this? I really don't understand." When the bloodwolf heard Zhong Xiaohua's words, it unconsciously raised its head and quietly looked at Zhong Xiaohua. There was no other expression in its eyes except for a faint trace of expectation and a trace of fear. Zhong Xiaohua took a step forward. The bloodwolf crouched and involuntarily took half a step back. However, it quickly lowered its head and took a step forward. "Sigh, It's said that skills don't weigh on one's body. I should learn the beast language again. Otherwise, communication won't be so troublesome. Zhong Xiaohua was speechless. Seeing that the Bloodwolf didn't seem to have any evil intentions, she thought for a moment and threw the Bloodwolf King's corpse in front of it. Brother Wolf, do you want to take your Bloodwolf King back and bury it? The Bloodwolf naturally didn't reply. However, when it saw Zhong Xiaohua throw the Bloodwolf King to the ground, its eyes revealed joy. It stepped forward and bit the Bloodwolf King's neck. Blood immediately flowed into the Bloodwolf King's mouth. The Bloodwolf King didn't hesitate and immediately drank until the wound on its neck stopped bleeding. Then, it threw the Bloodwolf King's corpse away and walked to Zhong Xiaohua's side. It half squatted and raised its head to howl. This howl was very different from the previous one. There was a bit of the Bloodwolf King's aura in the howl. When the surrounding wolves heard the howls of the Bloodwolves, they all revealed joyous expressions and howled towards the sky. The simultaneous howls of several hundred blood wolves spread far and wide across the vast grassland. Even the floating clouds in the sky changed color. -3. Chapter 675. Seeing the behavior of the wolves, Zhong Xiaohua was somewhat enlightened, but he was also somewhat apprehensive. At this time, he understood that this pack of blood wolves must have a king to guide them. Otherwise, the pack of wolves may disperse or be eaten by other fierce beasts. Their inheritance of the king should be the way that Bloodwolf drank the blood of the Bloodwolf King. Well, maybe this was just a superficial phenomenon, and he didn't know the truth. But today, the Bloodwolf King was killed by him. Seeing that the throne of the Bloodwolves was about to be lost, this Bloodwolf King bravely stepped forward and came to him at the risk of being killed by him, hoping that he would return the throne to them. For the sake of the entire wolf pack, the Bloodwolf King was actually willing to sacrifice his own life. Zhong Xiaohua unconsciously looked at the Bloodwolf King in a new light. But what made him apprehensive was whether the Bloodwolf King, who had just inherited the throne, would continue to follow the will of the previous Bloodwolf King and attack him. Soon, the new Bloodwolf King immediately expressed its stance. After it led the wolf pack to howl, it immediately squatted down and placed its head under Zhong Xiaohua's hand. Then, it used its head to slowly nudge against Zhong Xiaohua's hand. Hey! Zhong Xiaohua was stunned. This was similar to the performance of the lazy dog in the Guozhuang house. Zhong Xiaohua naturally stroked its head and said, "Brother Wolf, congratulations on obtaining the throne. But I'm very sorry, I don't have any meat bones here, so I can't celebrate with you. Please forgive me." How could the new Bloodwolf King understand? When it saw Zhong Xiaohua stroking its head, it was very happy and proud. The surrounding wolves also seemed to be envious and let out a low growl. Suddenly, the new Bloodwolf King's face changed. Its nose twitched a few times and its face became even more respectful. It turned its head and sniffed Zhong Xiaohua's chest. Zhong Xiaohua was puzzled. She thought that it was being naughty. She waved her hand and smiled. "Do you want to find a place to sleep like Little Black?" However, the new Bloodwolf King still put his nose on Zhong Xiaohua's chest and even used his mouth to enter Zhong Xiaohua's bosom. Zhong Xiaohua was stunned. She put her hand into her bosom and immediately understood. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile as he carried little Martin out. At this moment, little Martin's eyes were still closed and he did not care about the outside world. However, when Zhong Xiaohua carried little Martin out, the new Bloodwolf King immediately revealed a look of fear and respect as it quickly prostrated itself on the ground. The surrounding bloodwolves were also half fearful and half respectful. They bent their four legs and bent their bodies as if they were paying respects to their queen. Zhong Xiaohua was dumbfounded. If she knew that Little Black was so powerful when it was sleeping, she would have taken it out earlier. She had been so tired and worried for nothing. The wolves had been paying respects to Little Black for a long time. Naturally, Little Black ignored them. When Zhong Xiaohua saw this, she said, "New brother wolf, this child is still young and can't pay attention to you. When it grows up, you can pay respects to it." After that, she put Little Black back into her bosom. The new Bloodwolf King only dared to raise his head when he smelled little Martin's breath. However, he still did not dare to stand up. He crouched down and crawled in front of Zhong Xiaohua. He used his head to nod behind her. At this moment, Zhong Xiaohua understood. This action was similar to what Huan Huan did at the beginning. It meant that she was going to ride on it. However, this glory belonged to Little Black and she was just basking in its glory. Hence, Zhong Xiaohua did not stand on ceremony and rode on it. When the Blood Wolf King saw these people riding on it, it was very excited. It stood up and slowly carried Zhong Xiaohua down the slope. Seeing this scene, the entire wolf pack howled as if this was a supreme glory. Seeing this, Zhong Xiaohua could not be thick-skinned anymore. She took out Little Black and hugged it in front of her chest. Thus, the wolf pack became even more excited. The Blood Wolf King carried them down the slope and turned around a few times before walking towards Zhong Xiaohu's direction. At this moment, Zhong Xiaohu was completely stunned. He was even more shocked than when he saw Zhong Xiaohua descending from the sky. These were blood wolves that ate people without spitting out their bones. However, they were as docile as the mangy dogs in the Guozhuang house. Oh, they were even more docile than mangy dogs. At least when they had no bones, mangy dogs would ignore you. Walking to Zhong Xiaohu's side, Zhong Xiaohua jumped down and smiled at the Blood Wolf King. Well, you also worked hard. You should go back and reorganize your team. I think you also have a long way to go. I killed a lot of these blood wolves. The Blood Wolf King let out a low howl and circled around Zhong Xiaohua, but it didn't leave. It actually crouched down in the grass nearby. The pack of wolves behind it did the same. They were leisurely circling around in the same place, not in a hurry. Zhong Xiaohua was somewhat helpless. She really did not know what they meant. Looking at Zhong Xiaohu was also looking at her. Zhong Xiaohua said, "Second brother, don't look at me. I also don't know what they are doing. My matter can be dealt with later. First, let's take a look at your injuries." Zhong Xiaohu nodded and said, "All right. Anyway, looking at their appearance, they seem harmless. Let them stay. Oh, don't look at me first. If you want to look, you have to look at Chang'e first." Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, "Second sister-in-law's injuries, when I came here, I have already seen it. There is no danger to her life. You can rest assured. But you, just now you fought for a while. I still don't know the situation in your body. Let's take a look at you first." Zhong Xiaohu said embarrassedly, I don't know what you saw. This second sister-in-law seems to be a little early. If you shout now, only the two of us can hear it. When Chang'e wakes up, don't talk nonsense." Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, "I naturally saw what I should see. As for what I shouldn't see, I didn't see it at all. Second brother, you can rest assured." After that, she grabbed Zhong Xiaohu's wrist. First, she looked at his pulse, then she transferred a strand of true qi into his meridians. After a round of inspection, Zhong Xiaohua frowned slightly. Seeing this, Zhong Xiaohu's heart thumped. Then he comforted, "Xiaohua, is it very serious? It doesn't matter if you don't know how to treat it. Wait until we return to Shushin Peak." Zhong Xiaohua shook her head and said, "It is a bit serious. Just now, some flesh was bitten off by the blood wolf and a lot of blood flowed out. Moreover, there are some internal injuries in my body. It seems to be an old injury from before. The meridians in my body are somewhat atrophied. It should be caused by my exhaustion just now." Zhong Xiaohu was surprised. "Xiaohua, why do you say the same thing as the doctor in the hall? Your words are clear and logical. This internal injury was caused in the Misty Mountain Villa. There has been no medicine to treat it, so I kept it." Then he sighed, "Now, many of the brothers in the hall are injured. The medicine provided by the fragrant religion is not enough. This time, Hall Master Yang asked the sect leader for permission to let us come to the Yulan Grand Canyon to collect herbs for alchemy." "Oh, so that's how it is." Zhong Xiaohua understood and suddenly asked, "By the way, what about Captain He? Is he also at Shushin Peak?" "He Tianshu?" Zhong Xiaohu did not expect Zhong Xiaohua to ask so suddenly. He hesitated. "Well, he is at Shushin Peak." Then he changed the topic. "Not only Captain He, Marshal Uncle Shui, Martial Uncle Wen, Martial Uncle Lu and the others are also at Shushin Peak. Ha ha ha. Zhong Xiaohua was overjoyed. I was worried about them. It turns out that they are still alive. Hee hee, are they all well? Well, they are all well. Zhong Xiaohu hesitated and said, by the way, do you have the blood replenishing pill of the fragrant religion? If you have it, give me one. Oh, if you have two, give me one and keep the other one for Chang'e. Zhong Xiaohua was stunned and took out a bottle from her arms. She threw it to Zhong Xiaohu and said, there are only 4 pills. I will give them all to you. It's hard for you to remember second sister-in-law. Ha ha ha. Hee hee. Zhong Xiaohu smiled and opened the jade bottle. He poured out 1 pill, but he frowned when he smelled the medicine. He turned his head and said, Xiaohua, this doesn't seem to be the blood replenishing pill. I have seen the blood replenishing pill of the fragrant religion. It is different from this one. Zhong Xiaohua nodded, of course, this is not the blood replenishing pill. This is the Yuhuandan pill. You have internal injuries, so it is better to take the Yuhuandan pill. What? Yuhuandan pill? Zhong Xiaohu was stunned. His hands trembled and he almost dropped the jade bottle on the ground. He cried out in amazement, This is the legendary Yuhuandan pill used by the inner disciples of the fragrant religion Peak? Zhong Xiaohua secretly laughed and said, second brother, look at how surprised you are. Don't say that you are my second brother in the future. It is just the Yuhuandan pill. For the time being, there are only 4 pills. Maybe there will be more in the future. You take it first. I will help second sister-in-law connect her wound to her broken arm, and then you can help her take it. This. Zhong Xiaohu looked at the Yuhuandan pill in his hand and thought for a while. He said awkwardly, Xiaohua, that. Do you have any blood replenishing pills? My injuries are not serious, so don't waste the precious pills. You should keep it for yourself. After hearing this, Zhong Xiaohua thought of Nai Chenyu and thought, people who care about themselves are indeed different from others. If it was someone else, they would have taken it even if they were not convinced. She immediately shook her head, I have no use for this. Second brother, you should take it quickly. This. If you don't need it, I will keep it for master. What happened to Hero when? Zhong Xiaohua asked curiously. She then thought of the news she heard earlier and asked carefully, is it because of your internal strength? Zhong Xiaohu nodded sadly, that is one thing. The main thing is that your internal injuries are more serious than mine. It has been so many years. Sigh. Zhong Xiaohua nodded and said, yes, don't you have 4 pills? You can keep one for master. But there is still master's junior Lu. She saved you and big brother before. Zhong Xiaohua felt a lump in her throat. -3. Chapter 676. Zhong Xiaohua's nose twitched, and then she said seriously, second brother, don't worry. I'll take care of it. I'll give you enough Yuhuandan pill. You should take it now. You're my second brother. If I don't give you any pills, I'll be in vain. Zhong Xiaohu smiled and said, that's what you said. I'm convinced. Zhong Xiaohua also smiled and said, take it, take it. Take it as much as you want. As long as you keep the one for second sister-in-law, you can take the other 3. It doesn't matter. Then, Zhong Xiaohua's heart flashed and he instructed, I don't have that many pills on hand right now. I'll give them to you when we get back. But you can't say that I gave them to you. Huh? Why? Zhong Xiaohu asked curiously. I have my own plan. Don't ask so much. Zhong Xiaohua made a mysterious face. Zhong Xiaohu had no choice but to hold up the Yuhuandan pill and said, I'm convinced. Just take it. No one is stopping you. Zhong Xiaohua rolled her eyes grumpily. She bent over and sat beside Chang'e. After taking Chang'e's pulse and checking her meridians with genuine qi, Zhong Xiaohua had a plan. She turned to Zhong Xiaohu, who had taken the Yuhuandan pill, and said, second brother, although second sister-in-law fainted, she just lost too much blood. She didn't have any internal injuries, and her meridians are still stable. You don't have to take the Yuhuandan pill. I still have the blood replenishing pill. She'll be fine after taking it. Zhong Xiaohu was unhappy when he heard that. He said angrily, look at you. You just said that you'd give your second sister-in-law the Yuhuandan pill. Why do you change your mind now? No, no. As he spoke, he walked in front of Chang Ji and squatted down. He supported Chang Ji's upper body and poured a jade rejuvenation pill into Chang Ji's mouth. Zhong Xiaohua said with a smile, isn't she called Chang'e? Why are you calling her second sister-in-law now? Zhong Xiaohu blushed. It was a slip of the tongue. Then, with a straight face, she said, why aren't you setting your elder sister Chang'e's bones? Do you want her to wake up and beg you? I wouldn't dare. Zhong Xiaohua stuck out her tongue. He hit all of Chang'e's major acupoints with his fingers and skillfully reconnected Chang'e's arm. Then he cut a few straight planks from a big tree in the distance to fix Chang'e's arm. At this time, Zhong Xiaohu sighed and said, I heard that the fragrant religion has a kind of small bone congealing pill that can heal bones. When we go back, I will ask the hall master to get some from the inner disciples. Ayo, that's right. Zhong Xiaohua slapped his forehead. He had forgotten about this. She then took out a jade bottle from her bosom and poured out a pill. Second brother, help second sister-in-law feed it. Huh? Zhong Xiaohu was very surprised. He looked at Zhong Xiaohua's bosom and said in amazement, Xiaohua, could it be that you have 100 treasures pouch in your bosom? You can have anything I say. You actually have a small bone congealing pill with you? Zhong Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She said, this isn't a small bone congealing pill. This is a genuine bone congealing pill. A genuine bone congealing pill? Zhong Xiaohu couldn't believe it. He took it and sniffed it. He shook his head and said, if you said it was a Yuhuandan pill, I would have believed it. Lingering fragrance peak has it. The bone congealing pill has been lost in the fragrant religion for a long time. Where did you get it? Moreover, this pill doesn't have any medicinal smell. How can it be a pill? Your second brother is very smart. You can't fool him. It's up to you whether you want it or not. You still dare to doubt it. Zhong Xiaohua made a move to snatch the pill back. Zhong Xiaohu dodged and said with a smile, it's a good deal. I don't believe that you're using a fake pill to fool your second. Your elder sister Chang'e. After he finished speaking, he helped Chang'e feed the pill. Zhong Xiaohua took out some pills to stop bleeding and give them to Zhong Xiaohu. She helped him apply them externally and let him do the same for Chang'e. Only then did she feel completely relieved. She unsealed the sealed acupoints on Chang'e's body. The Yuhuandan pill and bone congealing pill were really miraculous. In just a moment, the medicine took effect. Chang'e's pale face was already slightly red. Zhong Xiaohu also nodded and said, my body is warm and really comfortable. The wound almost doesn't hurt anymore. At this time, the setting sun was still shining dazzlingly and refused to set. Zhong Xiaohua also felt warm in her heart. Zhong Xiaohu asked again, by the way, Xiaohua, how did you know we were here? We were so far away. Before he finished his words, Zhong Xiaohua jumped up and shouted, oh, second brother, I've been talking to you so much that I've forgotten about Chen Chen. Zhong Xiaohu was also shocked. You met Chen Chen? Where is she? Is she okay? Zhong Xiaohua hurriedly said, she was fine just now. Now, she should be fine. After that, she was about to fly away, but her eyes caught the Bloodwolf King and she immediately waved to it. The Bloodwolf King saw this and jumped up happily. Zhong Xiaohua flew up and patted its head as if she was patting Huan Huan. The Bloodwolf King was stunned, but it knew what Zhong Xiaohua meant. It growled and quickly walked in the direction indicated by Zhong Xiaohua. Dozens of blood wolves around it immediately stood up and followed it. The other blood wolves still stayed quietly in their original places. The Bloodwolf King ran very fast. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, it arrived at the edge of the wild forest. When it arrived, it did not wait for Zhong Xiaohua's order and immediately rushed into the forest as if it had smelled something. Before Chen Chen's location, Zhong Xiaohua saw a lot of black beasts in front of them. Zhong Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat, thinking that this was bad. Could it be that Chen Chen had met with some mishap? However, he immediately felt that it could not be. Although he had left in a hurry, He had set up the restrictions. There was no reason for a beast to break through the restrictions. Could it be that another beast like the Bloodwolf King had appeared? But when she got closer, Zhong Xiaohua could not help but be stunned. She saw that in the middle of the beasts, Chen Chen was sitting in the circle that Zhong Xiaohua had drawn. Her beautiful face was pale and her lips were trembling. She held the black puppy in one hand and kept stroking the black puppy's back with the other to get rid of her fear. However, the terrified Chen Chen completely forgot to look at the expressions and postures of the surrounding beasts. They were all prostrating on the ground, showing respect to a king. Seeing the appearance of the beasts and the black puppy in Chen Chen's hand, Zhong Xiaohua understood the reason. She jumped down from the Bloodwolf King's back. The Bloodwolf King also quickly fell to the ground and respectfully bowed to the black puppy. When Chen Chen saw Zhong Xiaohua appear, it was as if she had seen her savior. She stood up at once and rushed forward. Thinking of Zhong Xiaohua's instructions, she did not dare to go out of the circle and looked anxious. Zhong Xiaohua walked closer and took the jade talismans. She smiled and said, "Don't worry, senior sister Chen Chen. It's all over now." "Really?" Chen Chen said in surprise. "Senior brother and senior sister are all right?" Zhong Xiaohua shook her head and said, "Of course." As if seeing Zhong Xiaohua in the martial arts exhibition, Chen Chen laughed out loud. Then she looked around timidly and pulled Zhong Xiaohua's sleeve and said, "Zhong Xiaohua, after you left for a while, these beasts came and scared me to death. Hehe, your circle is really useful. They don't dare to cross it at all. You are getting more and more powerful. You are really great." Zhong Xiaohua smiled bitterly and thought, although my restriction is useful, it's not as good as Little Black's. However, he could not tell her and only smiled. "It's good that you know. I've always been low-key. Don't tell others." Hee. Chen Chen laughed again and said, I won't. Well, let's go and see second brother and the others." After that, she called a bloodwolf and let Chen Chen ride it. How could Chen Chen dare to ride it? She had been chased by a bloodwolf for a long time and even saw a senior brother being eaten by a bloodwolf. Zhong Xiaohua smiled and jumped on the Bloodwolf King. She said, "If you don't get on, I'll leave. Now you're out of the circle and don't have my protection." Chen Chen heard this and jumped on the back of a bloodwolf. Two blood wolves roared and carried the two of them back to the high slope. All the other beasts also ran behind them. Seeing another group of beasts coming from afar, Zhong Xiaohu was anxious. Before he could react, he saw Zhong Xiaohua and Chen Chen riding a bloodwolf in front of him. Only then did he feel relieved. "Senior brother, what happened to senior sister?" Chen Chen jumped off the bloodwolf's back and tears fell down. "He went straight to Chang'e." Zhong Xiaohu smiled and said, "It's okay. She just took the elixir and is sleeping now. I think she'll wake up tomorrow morning." "Elixir?" Chen Chen was stunned and said, "Where did we get the elixir from?" But then he woke up and looked at Zhong Xiaohua. He said, "Thank you, Zhong Xiaohua." Damn. Zhong Xiaohua secretly said, "How can I not save my own sister-in-law? How can I let an outsider like you thank me?" Zhong Xiaohua looked up at the sky and said, "Second brother, it's not early anymore. Let's find a place to rest. If you didn't bring a tent, you can only find a cave." Second. Before she could say the words second sister-in-law, Zhong Xiaohu stared at her and she could only say, "Sister Chang'e just took the elixir. We have to find a suitable place." Zhong Xiaohu thought for a moment and pointed to a small mountain in the distance. He said, "That's where we rested last night. But it's a little far. Isn't it inconvenient?" Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, "It's not inconvenient at all. As long as you can carry Sister Chang'e, it's fine." After saying that, little Martin escaped from his arms and walked to a mammoth. When the mammoth saw little Martin, it immediately bent its limbs. Zhong Xiaohua patted its head and turned to say, "Second brother, you carry Sister Chang'e. Sister Chang'e will sit on this big guy. Oh, Chen Chen and I will ride the bloodwolf." Zhong Xiaohu was naturally happy. He carefully carried Chang'e and jumped on the mammoth's back. Chen Chen didn't dare to ride the bloodwolf and had to find an elephant to ride. Zhong Xiaohua was still riding the Bloodwolf King. The four of them went straight to the small mountain in front of them with a fierce beast. -3. Chapter 677. Of course, Changa pursed her lips and smiled. Actually, as Chen Chen said just now, your second brother's internal strength should be more than 30 years, but his real internal strength is only 20 years. This is what I was puzzled about. Of course, this situation also shows that as long as Xiaohu works hard, the difference of 10 years can be achieved very quickly. In other words, my second brother doesn't need to spend another 10 years of hard work to achieve the internal strength that other people need 10 years to achieve. That should be the case. Changa nodded. Zhong Xiaohua pondered for a moment and asked, then what if my second brother gains another 30 years of internal strength? Ah! What? This? How is this possible? The three of them were very surprised and cried out at the same time. Changa opened her eyes wide and said, Xiaohua, the thing you gave Xiaohu, is it the legendary magical pill that increases internal strength? Do you have the same kind of pill? Then, without waiting for Zhong Xiaohua to nod, she explained, maybe you don't know, this kind of pill that increases internal strength, although it's good, seems to be very harmful to the meridians. Think about it, it's a narrow road for a person to walk on. If you suddenly let 3 rows of carriages walk side by side, there will definitely be a big problem. I think that the signs of Xiaohu's qi deviation just now are because his meridians can't adapt to the huge amount of internal strength. Then doesn't that mean that no one dares to take the pill that increases internal strength? Zhong Xiaohua knew that Changa's guess was wrong, but she still asked curiously. This situation is also because your second brother has just started cultivating inner force. If he has been cultivating for a long time, like our Misty sect's sect leader OU, which one of them hasn't been immersed in inner force for decades? Their meridians have been tempered to be incomparably tough. This sudden increase in inner force makes it easier to control. Oh, so it's like that. Zhong Xiaohua somewhat understood, of course, his heart was more at ease. What was the meridian nourishing pill for? It was to nourish the meridians and temper the meridians. Zhong Xiaohu had taken the soothing meridians pill, so the meridians in his body were definitely comparable to those of experts who had cultivated for decades. Then, Changa said, there's another problem. Each kind of elixir is only effective for the first time. If you continue to take it, the effect will be greatly reduced. I estimate that if you give the same elixir to Xiaohu, it will definitely not increase his power by more than 10 years. At most, it will increase his power by 3 to 5 years. Zhong Xiaohua was still unwilling to give up and asked, then, what if it's a different type of pill? This? Changa looked at Zhong Xiaohua as if he was looking at a monster. In Jianghu, he had only heard of the elixir that could increase power, but had never seen it. Even in the Misty School, he used to pick up the licorice roots from the secret site and refine some elixirs that could increase power by a little. But this was not something that Changa could know. Moreover, as long as one could get this kind of elixir, he didn't know how much virtue he had accumulated in his previous life. When Changa saw that Zhong Xiaohu's power suddenly increased by more than 10 years, of course, he thought that Zhong Xiaohua only had one elixir. Then, Zhong Xiaohua asked again, and Changa naturally thought that maybe there were 2 elixirs. This possibility had reached the limit of Changa's imagination. At this time, when he heard that there was another kind of elixir that could increase power, Changa almost thought that he was dreaming, or that Zhong Xiaohua was joking. Although Chen Chen's kung fu was not as good as Changa's, and her knowledge was not as good as Changa's, she had heard about this kind of magical elixir. At this time, she unconsciously curled her lips and said, Zhong Xiaohua, you really know how to brag. Zhong Xiaohua laughed. When he was about to speak, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He thought of the joke Zhong Xiaohua made yesterday, sword radiance. Sword radiance was not something that could be done with more than 20 years of power. Since Zhong Xiaohua said so yesterday, could it be? Zhong Xiaohua looked at his second brother, his future second sister-in-law, and then at the petite and dainty Chen Chen who had a look of disbelief on her face. Zhong Xiaohua smiled. If they could not be trusted, then who else in this world could be trusted? So, Zhong Xiaohua nodded with a smile. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua's affirmative action, Chang'e almost felt that all his cognition was about to change. Everything could happen to this child in his impression. Well, she somewhat forgot that yesterday before she fainted, she saw the immortal falling from the sky. Do you really have other elixirs that can increase one's power? Even Chen Chen felt that her mouth and tongue were dry, and still asked in disbelief. Zhong Xiaohua raised her chin and somewhat disdained to answer. Chen Chen stamped her feet and used her shoulder to support Chang'e, who was supported by her. Chang'e did not care about their business. She only thought for a moment and said, even if there are more elixirs, Xiaohu should not take them at this time. Seeing that Zhong Xiaohua and his brother were puzzled, Chen Chen next to them said, on the first day of practicing internal strength, didn't Master say that the most important thing to practice internal strength is to take one step at a time? Don't bite off more than you can chew. Senior brother has got more than 20 years of power, but he hasn't mastered it well. Just now, he almost went mad. If he suddenly increases his power, won't it be more difficult to control it? Let's wait until senior brother carefully practices the internal strength that he got for free and uses it freely. After that, she rolled her eyes at Zhong Xiaohua and said, you don't even know this. What did your master teach you? Zhong Xiaohua secretly sighed and said, it's so good to have a master. If it weren't for Chang'e and Chen Chen, I would have done something bad with good intentions. Then she cupped her hands and said, thank you for your explanation, Master Chen. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known. Thank you for your advice. Bah! Chen Chen spat and her expression was very similar to Nai Qianyu's. But soon her expression changed and was completely different from Nai Qianyu's. She said shyly, senior brother can't take it today. Don't you want to give me one of the elixirs for the sake of my explanation? Then she stretched out her chubby little hand. Oh, okay. Hearing that, Zhong Xiaohua did not hesitate at all. She took out a jade bottle and poured 2 elixirs into Chen Chen's hand. Ah! Chen Chen was stunned and said, you're really giving it to me? Then she smelled it and then laughed. Zhong Xiaohua, what kind of elixir is this? It doesn't smell like medicine at all. Are you trying to fool a little boy? He, I know this elixir is expensive, but I'm just teasing you. If you don't want to give it to me, then don't give it to me. Why do you give me a fake elixir? You even gave me 2 of them. It shows that you're generous. Zhong Xiaohua touched her nose and said, one is for you, and the other is for Sister Chang'e. He, you even want to fool senior Sister Chang'e. Chen Chen still did not believe it. Chen, Zhong Xiaohu next to her scolded, don't make trouble with Xiaohua. Last night, Xiaohua gave me this elixir. Chen Chen had always been Chang'e's little tail, and now she was naturally taken care of by Zhong Xiaohu. She did not dare to disobey Zhong Xiaohu's words and did not dare to not believe them. Hearing Zhong Xiaohu's words, she could not help but tremble in her hands, and the 2 meridian nourishing elixirs almost fell to the ground. She stammered, Zhong Xiaohua, you really want to give this elixir to me, and to senior Sister Chang'e? Zhong Xiaohua saw that Chen Chen was defeated, and she was secretly happy. She nodded and said, a gentleman keeps his word. I said it's for you, so it's for you. Chang'e next to her said, no, it's so expensive. Before she finished her words, Chen Chen pulled her arm and said reluctantly, senior Sister Chang'e, this is 20 years worth of power. Zhong Xiaohu also coughed a few times, stared at Chang'e, and said, Xiaohua gave it to you. Just take it. Why are you complaining? Hearing this, Chang'e was a little angry, but her face was flushed. She did not know that everything yesterday had been seen clearly by Zhong Xiaohua in the air. She had always put on airs and thought that she was Zhong Xiaohu's senior sister. At this time, when she was scolded by Zhong Xiaohu, everything was exposed. How could she not be ashamed and angry? Alas, it was just that she did not realize it herself. When she talked about Zhong Xiaohu just now, she called him Xiaohu and Xiaohu, but did not hear her call him junior fellow apprentice Zhong. Then, Chang'e was a little shy and said, since it's Xiaohua's kindness, I won't stand on ceremony. In fact, I also miss it very much. Seeing that Chang'e was not any different from the old Chang'e, Zhong Xiaohua was very happy. She looked at her second brother who was smiling foolishly next to her and really despised him. Then, Xiaohua, Do you still have? Changa asked very hesitantly. She could not even finish her sentence. Zhong Xiaohua immediately understood and said with a smile, Sister Changa, do you think I have many of these pills? Moreover, even if I do, can I let others know about it except for you? Changa nodded and did not ask any more questions. That's right, senior sister. My martial arts in the sect aren't high to begin with. Only after I take this pill can I show them my prowess. If they all take it and their martial arts are higher than mine, what fun would there be? Zhong Xiaohu also nodded and took a step forward. You must be careful about this. Don't let others know about it, especially the people of the fragrance cult. I heard that the Misty School was destroyed because of this. We must not repeat the same mistake. I know, senior brother. Chen Chen said softly, I'm not that stupid. Changa naturally nodded. Then Zhong Xiaohu asked, Xiaohua, when is it suitable for Changa and Chen Chen to take this pill? Will Changa's injury affect it? Zhong Xiaohua thought for a moment and asked, Sister Changa, the bones in your arm are broken and now I'm fixing it. Don't you know that it will affect your internal strength? Changa smiled and said, when I woke up just now, I already tried it. It didn't affect me much. Well, that's good. Zhong Xiaohua said, it's best to take it after the bones are healed, but it's okay to take it now. Hearing this, Zhong Xiaohu immediately urged, then what are you waiting for? It takes 100 days to break bones and tendons. When Changa's arm is healed, won't it take a few months? Not to mention that Xiaohua may not be cheap, the environment of the Misty Hall is not suitable for taking this kind of pill. Everything should be done in the Yulan Canyon. Zhong Xiaohu was even more anxious than Changa. Please vote monthly, please vote, please collect, please tip, thank you. -3. Chapter 678. So the Blood Wolf King took the lead, with the tall and thin Zhong Xiaohua riding on its back. Behind them were 2 huge mammoths and an elephant, each carrying 3 people, followed by a group of fierce beasts, which were surrounded by hundreds of blood wolves. Together, they walked towards the distant hill. When they were halfway there, Zhong Xiaohua suddenly thought of something. She patted her forehead and said loudly, Second brother, you go first. I'll be back soon. After that, she jumped off the Blood Wolf King, turned around and disappeared. Zhong Xiaohu and Chen Chen heard the sound and turned around. But there was no sign of Zhong Xiaohua on the back of the Blood Wolf King. This kid, she's so old, but she's still so careless. Zhong Xiaohu shook his head slightly and ignored her. He was only worried about the warm beauty in his arms. She could even enter and leave the Blood Wolf King, so why should he worry about her? Chen Chen's eyes were full of stars. She didn't have time to ask Zhong Xiaohua how she flew into the sky, but now she disappeared in a flash. What kind of elixir had this little country boy been fed? The blood wolves, mammoths and other fierce beasts ran very fast. When the sun went down, they had already reached the hill. Zhong Xiaohu occasionally looked back and couldn't help but cry out, Xiaohua, when did you come back? Zhong Xiaohua shrugged and said, when you saw Sister Changa's injury on the way, I came back. Zhong Xiaohu blushed and said, why didn't you say hello when you came back? This. Zhong Xiaohua jumped off the back of the Blood Wolf King and said, I saw that you were concentrating, so I didn't dare to disturb you. Zhong Xiaohu was speechless. He carried Changa and carefully jumped down from the tall mammoth. Chen Chen looked at the caves halfway up the mountain and her face was extremely gloomy. Needless to say, last night, there were dozens of disciples in the hall and it was lively here. Now, there were only 3 people left. How could she not be sad? Seeing this, Zhong Xiaohua didn't know how to comfort him. Didn't she also feel terrible for a long time when she saw the disciples of the Pill Expansion Hall being killed? This was human nature. If this was not the case, this person would be heartless. The hill was not high. Although Zhong Xiaohu was injured, he could still climb it. Therefore, Zhong Xiaohua looked at the surrounding beasts and patted the Blood Wolf King's head. She waved her hand outside and said, Brother Wolf, let them all go. I have seen your intentions. When your 2 little princes, or little princesses wake up, I will tell them. They can't see anything now, so I have the final say in your performance. So you don't have to wait here. It's getting late and we need to rest. The Blood Wolf King was not very human. It growled a few times. Except for a few beasts that seemed to be more qualified than the Blood Wolf King, they ignored it. The other beasts looked at Zhong Xiaohua, who was standing beside the Blood Wolf King, and reluctantly turned around and left. Then, the Blood Wolf King turned its head and opened its mouth. Its blood-red tongue stuck out for a long time and it seemed to be reporting to Zhong Xiaohua. It seemed that there was still some grievance in its eyes. Zhong Xiaohua curled her lips and said, "Are you going to snitch now?" Then, he patted its head to show that he understood. Then, he pointed at the hundreds of wolves around them and waved his hand. The Blood Wolf King was very aggrieved and it groaned in a low voice to protest. Zhong Xiaohua was puzzled. Where is the demeanor of the Blood Wolf King? Why do you look more and more like a mangy dog from the Guozhuang house? However, since Zhong Xiaohua had already told the Blood Wolf King what she wanted, it was not up to Zhong Xiaohua to decide whether it would go or not. In fact, if there was a blood wolf to protect her, she would be able to sleep peacefully at night. Therefore, Zhong Xiaohua ignored the Blood Wolf King and walked to Zhong Xiaohu's side and said, "Second brother, let's go up. Oh, this mountain is quite high. You are injured. Do you want me to carry Sister Chang'e?" Zhong Xiaohu curled his lips and said, "It's just a small mountain. How can it be a high mountain in your mouth? Chang'e is not heavy. I can carry her. If I move here and there, I'm afraid I'll hurt my wound." Hee hee. Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said to Chen Chen, "Senior sister, you lead the way." Chen Chen suppressed her sadness and said in a low voice, "Okay." Then, she stretched her body and used her qinggong to go up the mountain. Zhong Xiaohua jumped to Zhong Xiaohu's side and supported him with one hand. She did not use the wind controlling technique, only the Misty School's qinggong, and slowly followed behind Chen Chen. In the beginning, Zhong Xiaohu still wanted to use his internal force, but just as he started to use his internal force, there was a piercing pain in his meridians, so he did not dare to use his internal force again. Moreover, seeing that Zhong Xiaohua was effortlessly pulling him along and was not much slower than Chen Chen, he simply did not exert any strength at all. He did not even take a step forward and only focused on protecting the stability of his arms. Zhong Xiaohua saw this and smiled. She only used a little strength with her left hand to lift the two of them and walked up the mountain easily. Not long after, the four of them came to the mountainside, where there were 3 caves. The entrances of the caves had been repaired. Obviously, they were the caves where the disciples of the Misty Hall lived yesterday. Zhong Xiaohu looked at the caves and said, "Among the 3 caves, the one on the far left is the largest. Yesterday, our ordinary disciples all lived there. The one in the middle is a little smaller and only the female disciples lived there. The one on the far right can only accommodate 2 people, which is where senior brother Chen, the leader, lived." Alas! Zhong Xiaohua frowned and said, "I also wanted to say that it might be dangerous at night and we should live together. Since second brother said so, I guess you must be careful and not bully others. Then we have to let Sister Chang'e and Chen Chen live in the small cave." Bartilda not only did Zhong Xiaohua finish her words, but Zhong Xiaohu also spat and said angrily, "I am not Li Jinfeng. Is it necessary? I just told you about the layout of the 3 caves and also remembered the brothers who died yesterday. When did I go too far? Chang'e was hurt like this, how could I bear to? How could I let Chen Chen take care of her alone?" Zhong Xiaohua smiled. His smile was filled with joy. She seemed to have never been so happy in the past few years. Zhong Xiaohu also pursed his lips and couldn't restrain his smile. The dark clouds that had been in his heart for many years were swept away the moment he saw Zhong Xiaohua today. Chen Chen also said quickly, "I'd better live with senior brother and senior sister. In the past, when there were many people and there was no place to live, didn't we still live together? Don't listen to this guy's nonsense. There are only a few of us. Senior brother will protect you well." Zhong Xiaohu rolled his eyes at Zhong Xiaohua and said to Chen Chen gently, "Okay." Chen Chen was like a cheerful bird and said, "I'll go to the middle cave to tidy up and make a warm bedding for each of you." Zhong Xiaohu said quickly, "Don't bother. Make a bedding for your senior sister Chang'e first and let her lie down first. Zhong Xiaohua said with a smile, the bedding is not as warm as second brother's arms. Zhong Xiaohu's face turned red and he said, I'm tired too. While they were talking, Chen Chen shouted from inside, Senior brother, come in. I've made the bedding. Zhong Xiaohua was stunned and blurted out, so fast? They were all used last night. Just tidy them up. Zhong Xiaohu said angrily. He greatly despised Zhong Xiaohua's lack of common sense. When they entered the cave, it was already dusk. There was already a torch lit in the cave. Perhaps it was used last night. Zhong Xiaohu carefully put Chang'e on the hay near the inside and turned back to say, Xiaohua, come and take a look. Is there anything wrong with her after the bumpy journey? Seeing that her second brother cared so much about Chang'e, Zhong Xiaohua obeyed and stepped forward. She placed her fingers on Chang'e's wrist and carefully examined her pulse. Then, she used her true qi to check her meridians. In the end, she was still worried and released her remaining divine sense to check everything. Only then did she say, don't worry, everything is normal. With me, the great genius doctor of Rejuvenation Valley, nothing will happen to elder sister Chang'e. Zhong Xiaohua didn't expect that the Qi Huang technique she learned in Rejuvenation Valley would be used on second brother and Chang'e in Yulan Canyon. Rejuvenation Valley? Great doctor. Chen Chen was curious at first, then he laughed and asked, when did you go to Rejuvenation Valley? That year, Villa Master You wanted to go there but he returned halfway. Haha, not only did you go there, but you also became a great doctor. By the way, I saw you checking her pulse just now. Do you really have medical skills? Zhong Xiaohua patted his chest casually and said with a smile, of course, great Dr. Zhong, it's true. Zhong Xiaohu didn't say anything at this time. Zhong Xiaohua had already skillfully helped them bandage and set their bones. Although she couldn't be called a great doctor, she couldn't take off the hat of knowing medical skills. Well, then quickly tell me how you learned medical skills. Chen Chen was extremely curious and opened her eyes wide. I'm going to faint. Zhong Xiaohua rubbed his eyes. If it weren't for the torches in the cave, he almost thought that the small and delicate Chen Chen in front of him was the inner disciple Chen Chen of Lingxiang Peak. Why is every woman so curious? Zhong Xiaohua secretly said. However, he walked out of the cave and said, there are many stories in 4 or 5 years. Let's talk slowly. After walking out of the cave, the voice came again, I'll go get some dry wood first and make a bonfire. When Zhong Xiaohu heard this, he was about to say something to stop him, but then he thought that since the Blood Wolf King had become Zhong Xiaohua's mount, he wouldn't be afraid of raising a bonfire and attracting fierce beasts. Sure enough, not long after, Zhong Xiaohua came up with a big bundle of dry wood. Just behind him, there was a blood wolf meekly carrying an even bigger bundle of dry wood. Zhong Xiaohua put it in the cave and the blood wolf obediently went away. Zhong Xiaohua rubbed his hands and said, good luck. I really can't help it. The blood wolf king left, but left a lot of blood wolves around. I saw them just now and casually took them. It seemed that only Zhong Xiaohua could make a blood wolf carry firewood. In this Yulan Grand Canyon, it was probably the first time in thousands of years. Zhong Xiaohu and Chen Chen were dumbfounded. Zhong Xiaohua easily made a bonfire. For a while, the cave became much warmer. -3. Chapter 679. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua skillfully raising the bonfire, Zhong Xiaohu's heart felt sour for no reason. His younger brother had grown up with him. Even before they parted at Shitsue Mountain, he had never seen him tend to any bonfire. Now that he saw him skillfully, he didn't know how much hardship he had suffered. Zhong Xiaohu had forgotten that his younger brother was already an 18-year-old adult. He should still know the necessary common sense. People said that in the eyes of parents, children would never grow up. Wasn't it the same in the eyes of an older brother? Zhong Xiaohu softly asked, Xiaohua, where have you been these past few years? How did you suddenly appear in the fragrance cult? Why did you appear in the Yulan Grand Canyon? You haven't gone home to see your parents, right? Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, second brother, there have been too many things in the past few years. I can't explain it all in a short time. Since I can see you, we brothers have plenty of time. There's no need to rush. Oh, I have already returned to the Guozhuang house. Father and mother are very good. Ha 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 ha. Sister-in-law also gave birth to a big fat boy. Is that so? Zhong Xiaohu was pleasantly surprised. He hadn't heard any news from his hometown for a long time. At this time, when he heard the news, his eyes suddenly became moist. Good, good, good. Mother and father are all well. With big brother and sister-in-law at home, I can rest assured. Now that I have a grandson to hold, mother also has something to do. Look at you, it seems that you don't want to go home. Zhong Xiaohua glanced at his second brother and said, when I came out, mother was very worried about you. She heard that the Misty school was destroyed. She didn't know whether you were alive or not. I came to the fragrance cult to look for you. Hehe, I didn't expect to meet you here before I even reached Shushin Peak. This god is really interesting. When Zhong Xiaohu heard this, his heart thumped and he said, then, what should we do? The fragrance cult has always been a place where people can enter but can't leave. How can they pass our news to father and mother? Zhong Xiaohua stretched lazily and said, since you're living well, I'm relieved. Although my parents are worried, it's still good news. After a few years, when someone from the incense cult leaves, we'll think of something. Right now, it's definitely impossible. Zhong Xiaohu thought for a moment. What his younger brother said was right. Although the two brothers were outside, they were still alive and well. This was what his parents were most concerned about. It was only a matter of time before the news reached home. It was better than bad news. Zhong Xiaohua smiled when she saw that her second brother was a little sad. Don't think too much. Just take care of yourself. That's the best way to comfort your parents. Immediately, he looked at Chang'e who was lying on the bed and said in a low voice, he also brought back a charming wife. Father and mother will probably laugh their teeth off. As he said this, he put his shoulder on Zhong Xiaohua's shoulder and made a you-know expression. Zhong Xiaohu's face turned red. Looking at Chang'e's red cheeks, his eyes softened and his complexion became much better. Looking at the sky outside, Zhong Xiaohua said, second brother, it is not early. I think it is better to heal your meridians as soon as possible. This internal injury can be cured sooner. Zhong Xiaohu was puzzled and said, it is still early. Healing in the dead of night is the right way. Zhong Xiaohua touched his nose and said, you have time, but I don't. When the time comes, I won't be able to protect you. Zhong Xiaohu was startled and immediately understood. He said with a smile, you still can't wake up at night. Shrugging, Zhong Xiaohua said, who knows? Having a good sleep, full of energy, and a good appetite is not a bad thing. Then, she looked at Chen Chen, who was lying beside Chang'e and snoring because of a day of fear. She got up and walked out of the cave. She cast a few jade talismans and sealed the entrance of the cave firmly. Then she turned around and said, I happen to have a medicinal pill for healing meridians. I'll let you have a taste. After saying this, under Zhong Xiaohu's incredulous gaze, she took out a jade bottle from her arms. It was the meridian nourishing pill that Zhong Xiaohua refined in Rejuvenation Valley. It was written in the formula that the main effect of the meridian nourishing pill was to nourish the meridians in the body and repair damaged meridians. Although this effect was targeted at practitioners of the Way of Immortality, the meridians used by the internal strength of martial arts were the same as those of the Way of Immortality. Presumably, it would be effective. It wasn't that Zhong Xiaohua hadn't thought of using the refined Crimson Flame Pill, but the Crimson Flame Pill was obviously a byproduct of the Meridian Nourishing Pill. Moreover, according to Rejuvenation Valley, it only increased one's power and didn't know if it had the effect of repairing meridians. Zhong Xiaohua didn't want his second brother to try this. Moreover, the Crimson Flame Pill was a medicinal pill of the Way of Immortality, and the Meridian Nourishing Pill was its byproduct. Even if Zhong Xiaohua was given 10,000 reasons, he would choose the best medicinal pill for his second brother first. Zhong Xiaohu watched as Zhong Xiaohua poured out a medicinal pill from the bottle. He took it with his hand and very naturally put it in front of his nose to smell it. He said curiously, why doesn't this medicinal pill have any medicinal smell? Don't tell me it's already lost its effect. Zhong Xiaohua shook his head with a smile. Helpless, Zhong Xiaohu said again, it seems that apart from the Yuhuandan pill you gave me, the bone-solidifying pill just now, and this medicinal pill are all strange. Other good medicinal pills overflow with medicinal fragrance and have good appearance. This medicinal pill of yours, however, has nothing at all. Right, what's the name of this? Meridian nourishing pill, Zhong Xiaohua said unhappily, it's specially made to repair meridians. If you don't like it, then just don't eat it. Haven't you heard of the saying of the ancients, a good medicinal pill doesn't show off its appearance? Zhong Xiaohu shook his head with a deadpan expression, I really haven't heard of it. As he spoke, Zhong Xiaohu walked to a corner slightly further away from Chang'e and the others. He sat down cross-legged and asked, how do I take this medicinal pill? Of course it's taken orally, Zhong Xiaohua said with a beaming smile. Immediately, she also walked to Zhong Xiaohu's side and said, second brother, before you take the pill, you have to tell me the root of your meridian's cultivation. Hearing this, Zhong Xiaohu shook his head like a rattledrum. No, this is our Misty School's divine skill, I can't, at this point, he couldn't continue and covered up, without master's permission, I can't tell anyone. Even if you're my biological brother, I can't violate the rules of the faction. Okay. Hearing Zhong Xiaohu's words, Zhong Xiaohua was also happy. This meant that the disciples of the Misty School still regarded her as a disciple of the Misty School and not as a disciple of the Misty Hall. This was what Zhong Xiaohua wanted to see. Thus, Zhong Xiaohua sat cross-legged behind Zhong Xiaohu and said, take the medicinal pill, then follow the route of your internal strength cultivation and circulate the medicinal power in your meridians 3 times. You don't have to worry about anything else. So simple. Zhong Xiaohu couldn't believe it. Can my meridians be repaired just like that? Zhong Xiaohua nodded, it's that simple. Haven't you heard that simple is true? Okay. Zhong Xiaohu listened to Zhong Xiaohua's words. Putting the soothing meridians pill into his mouth, he only felt that the medicinal pill melted in his mouth. His mouth was full of medicinal fragrance. Zhong Xiaohu thought, Ayo, it seems that Xiaohua didn't trick me. Alas, if Zhong Xiaohua knew that second brother was thinking like this, wouldn't she vomit blood? When the medicinal pill entered his mouth, it turned into a warm current. Zhong Xiaohu carefully guided this warm current into his meridians. Then, according to the route recorded in the ethereal divine art, it slowly flowed in his meridians. Zhong Xiaohua sat beside her second brother and had already transferred a strand of qi to him. Wrapped in the medicinal power of the soothing meridians pill, it slowly flowed along the route that Zhong Xiaohu had pointed out. This soothing meridians pill was an immortal medicinal pill. Its effect on the martial arts meridians was still unknown. Although Zhong Xiaohua wanted to leave the best things for her family, she also had to ensure their safety. Zhong Xiaohua slowly controlled her qi to release the medicinal power of the soothing meridians pill. The medicinal power of the soothing meridians pill combined with the faint star power in it, slowly, carefully, and quickly repaired Zhong Xiaohu's broken meridians. Previously, when Zhong Xiaohu lived in the Guozhuang house, he had lived in the same room as Zhong Xiaohua. When Zhong Xiaohua practiced at night, she also practiced the ethereal divine art. At that time, Zhong Xiaohua was already able to attract starlight, so when Zhong Xiaohu guided his internal energy, some starlight also entered his meridians. The effect of the starlight was still unknown, but as early as the first time Zhong Xiaohua attracted lightning, she was already able to completely repair the meridians that had been torn by the violent lightning. Therefore, although Zhong Xiaohu only absorbed a small amount of star power, it was still very important to him. When Zhong Xiaohu started practicing the art of ethereal divination, he was already 18 years old. He had long since passed the best time to practice internal energy. Logically speaking, it was impossible for him to have greater achievements in the area of internal energy. However, it just so happened that this older disciple, who everyone looked down on as a direct disciple, achieved achievements that ordinary people could not achieve in 10 years in just 4 years. It was just that the Misty School was in a state of decline and no one paid attention to him, so Zhong Xiaohu did not have any opportunity to show off. It had to be said that all of this was related to the changes in his meridians caused by the star power that Zhong Xiaohu had introduced into his body. At this time, the Soothing Meridians pill itself was a miraculous medicine that could repair meridians. In addition, when Zhong Xiaohua was refining the pill, she had also introduced starlight into the pill. Wasn't the effect of this Soothing Meridians pill more than doubled? Furthermore, there were other effects that no one knew about. Zhong Xiaohua's true energy wrapped around the medicinal power of the Soothing Meridians pill and repaired Zhong Xiaohua's torn meridians bit by bit. After circulating one cycle, all the meridians were repaired. However, Zhong Xiaohua had previously told Zhong Xiaohu to circulate 3 cycles, so Zhong Xiaohu did not hesitate to start a new cycle from the lower dantian. Seeing that her second brother was continuing, Zhong Xiaohua did not dare to delay. Just like before, she slowly released the medicinal power of the Soothing Meridians pill. This time, her meridians were completely repaired. The medicinal power of the Soothing Meridians pill and the star power began to transform and expand them. After one cycle, the flexibility and elasticity of her meridians changed dramatically. Even the width of her meridians had increased by 30%. Following that was the third cycle. This time, the effect of the Soothing Meridians pill was not as strong as the second time, but there was still some improvement and the width of her meridians had also increased. -3. Chapter 680. After 3 circulations, Zhong Xiaohu's meridians were completely different from before. Just based on the refinement of his meridians, it could be said that he was on par with the 6 ethereal tigers of the past. However, when the Meridian Soothing pill's medicinal power returned to his lower dantian, there was still a lot of medicinal power left. At this moment, Zhong Xiaohua's mind seemed to have been struck by lightning. He instantly thought of the time when he was in Lu Town, when he rescued that little girl on the 7th of July and pointed out that evil thief's dantian. Since he could use his internal energy to poke a hole in the dantian, preventing his internal energy from being stored in the dantian, then could he also repair the hole in the dantian and restore the internal energy in his body? Moreover, since the Meridian Soothing pill's medicinal power could repair his meridians, it should also be able to repair his dantian. Thus, Zhong Xiaohua didn't greet Zhong Xiaohu. He wrapped the Meridian Soothing pill's medicinal power with his vital energy and slowly released the medicinal power around his dantian in an attempt to repair his lower dantian. Sure enough, the Meridian Soothing pill's lower dantian had the same effect as the meridians. Not only did it completely repair some parts of Zhong Xiaohua's lower dantian, it also transformed his lower dantian into a tougher and wider one. This kind of effect was something that could not be achieved by any other martial Dao cultivation method. Seeing that his lower dantian had been completely refined and that the Meridian Soothing pill's medicinal power was still half gone, Zhong Xiaohua had no choice but to withdraw her vital energy and whisper, "Second brother, the Meridian Soothing pill's medicinal power doesn't seem to be completely used up. You should circulate your energy and refine it. Perhaps there will be an unexpected gain." An unexpected gain? Zhong Xiaohu was also puzzled. However, he still followed Zhong Xiaohua's instructions and silently circulated the ethereal divine art to slowly refine the medicinal power left in his dantian. This tempering process was not a big deal, but rather, an extremely exquisite medicinal power rose from his dantian and flowed along his meridians. Every inch it flowed, a portion of inner energy would be generated. Every time it circulated, a portion of inner energy would be generated. Every time it circulated, a portion of inner energy would be generated. Zhong Xiaohu was overjoyed, but he didn't have time to tell Zhong Xiaohua about it. He just focused on absorbing this rare opportunity. When Zhong Xiaohua saw that her second brother was concentrating on his training, she didn't bother with him anymore. He was very clear that since the Crimson Flame pill could increase one's cultivation by 5 years, the remaining Meridian Soothing pill should also be able to increase one's internal energy. As for how much it could increase one's internal energy, he didn't care because the Meridian Soothing pill wasn't the most important pill. He also had the illustrious qi-generating pill prepared to give to Zhong Xiaohu. After settling Zhong Xiaohu down, Zhong Xiaohua raised her eyes to look at the bonfire that was no longer very bright. She added some more dry wood to the side and the flames immediately rose a lot higher. The entire cave suddenly became bright again. Because Changa had taken the pill, her body was absorbing the medicinal power. Not only did she not look cold, but the tip of her nose also exuded fine beads of sweat. On the other hand, Chen Chen, who was lying on her side, didn't bring any bedding because she had run away in a hurry. At this moment, she was curled up with the black puppy in her arms and was sleeping soundly. It seemed that she was still a little cold. Pinching her chin and thinking for a moment, Zhong Xiaohua took out the new clothes that Nai Chenyu had sewn for her from her purse and covered Chen Chen's body. She then got some dry grass from the side to cover herself. Only then did she walk to a corner alone and take out the primordial stones to restore the true energy in her body. After a long while, Zhong Xiaohua opened her eyes and raised her hand to look at the faint crack on her left hand. She revealed a bitter smile. At present, this silver pupil seemed to only be able to emit a silver beam of light and open the cave where the black lightning and yellow wind were buried. Its other functions were completely unknown. However, this thing was really not something that Zhong Xiaohua could control at the moment. Well, not to mention using it, it was impossible to make it behave. It had absorbed 90% of Zhong Xiaohua's divine sense and 50% of her true energy. It directly reduced Zhong Xiaohua's cultivation to the 4th or 5th level of the qi refining stage. However, except for the faint tiredness in the pupil, Zhong Xiaohua knew nothing about this thing. She could only regard it as a treasure in her heart. That was all. Moreover, if she connected the essence of herbalism with this thing, Zhong Xiaohua's entire body and mind would be exhausted, so much so that Zhong Xiaohua did not even have the mood to pay attention to it. The effort and the gain were really not proportionate. I made a deal that made me lose money tilde alas, I was careless tilde Zhong Xiaohua could not help but complain to herself. However, this silver pupil had already trapped Zhong Xiaohua's left hand. It was too late to regret. Zhong Xiaohua watched as Huang Feng easily extracted the silver eye from between his eyebrows. When it was time for him to control it, he didn't know how to do it. He could only let the mysterious eye live in his left hand temporarily. Looking at the time, it was already late. Zhong Xiaohua sat down cross-legged, picked up 2 vitality stones, and did her routine homework. Not long after, starlight fell from the sky, enveloping Zhong Xiaohua. At this moment, Zhong Xiaohua was not far away. Most of his body was within the starlight. Tonight's practice was not much different from Zhong Xiaohua's previous practice. However, when the starlight shone, the silver pupil in Zhong Xiaohua's left hand gradually opened on its own. There was no expression in the pupil, only a faint suction force. Regardless of whether it was the starlight from the sky or the qi of heaven and earth in the vitality stones, it was all sucked into the pupil. The next day, the first ray of sunlight shone into the cave. Zhong Xiaohua opened her eyes and the surrounding starlight immediately disappeared. The pupil in her left hand also quietly closed, leaving only a crack. Zhong Xiaohua checked the vital energy in her body and shook her head slightly. It was only a little more than last night. The fruits of her hard work this night had been reaped by the detestable pupil in her left hand. She raised her eyes to look at Zhong Xiaohua. He was still sitting cross-legged in the same manner as before. However, at this moment, there was a faint white gas emitting from his head. It was the crucial moment of refining the medicinal power. Zhong Xiaohua did not dare to disturb second brother. Her body floated up slightly and she directly left the cave. At this time, the sun had just risen and the sky was bright. It should be the time for birds to chirp. However, at this time, Zhong Xiaohua stood at the entrance of the cave and did not hear much movement. Only the faint noise of birds could be heard from far away. When Zhong Xiaohua looked down, she could not help but find it funny. In front of the small mountain, there were hundreds of blood wolves. They were separated by a distance of several feet. They were orderly and scattered, as if they were patrolling. They surrounded the area tightly. Presumably, the surrounding birds were scared away by them. The status of yellow wind and black lightning in this Yulan Grand Canyon is really indescribable. Zhong Xiaohua secretly sighed. She immediately removed the restriction at the entrance of the cave and practiced the Big Dipper magical fist in the open space at the entrance of the cave. While she was practicing, she heard a shout from behind her, "Eh? Why is it still the same fist technique? You didn't learn any other fist techniques?" Zhong Xiaohua knew that her second brother had come out. However, there were still a few times left to practice. She raised her voice and said, "Second brother, wait a moment. I will finish practicing this fist technique." "Oh, okay. It just so happens that I haven't practiced the 6 he fists for a long time. I will take this opportunity to exercise my hands and feet." As he said this, Zhong Xiaohu started practicing at the side. However, when Zhong Xiaohu finished practicing, Zhong Xiaohua still had not finished practicing. This made Zhong Xiaohu feel very strange. When he was at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency, Zhong Xiaohu did not cultivate inner strength and could only practice fist techniques. Naturally, he practiced the 6 he fists over and over again. When he cultivated inner strength, especially the Misty School's core inner strength, he already understood that no matter how exquisite a fist technique was, as long as it met with exquisite inner strength, it would be unrivaled. Therefore, he had already put all his energy into cultivating inner strength. It had also been a long time since he practiced the 6 he fists. Now that he saw that Zhong Xiaohua not only learned this fist technique, but also practiced it over and over again, he was puzzled. When Zhong Xiaohua finished practicing the last round, he could not help but ask the question in his heart. Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, "Everyone has their own fate. How about this, second brother, let's spar. You can use all your inner strength. We will know after we spar." When Zhong Xiaohu heard this, he did not reply. He took a big stride forward and leaped in front of Zhong Xiaohua. He raised his hand and struck out with a palm. It was one of the moves of the 6 he fists. Zhong Xiaohua smiled and raised her arm to catch it. This move seemed right but was actually wrong. However, it blocked Zhong Xiaohu's angle of attack. Because he was sparring with his younger brother, Zhong Xiaohu did not use his inner strength in the beginning. After more than 10 moves like this, he did not gain any advantage at all. Only then did he gradually use his inner strength. However, as Zhong Xiaohu's inner strength increased, Zhong Xiaohua's strength also gradually increased. Zhong Xiaohu still did not gain any advantage. When he thought of his younger brother's divine ability, Zhong Xiaohu did not hold back anymore. He used all his inner strength and did not hold back with his fists and legs. He attacked Zhong Xiaohua with all his strength. Zhong Xiaohua released her divine sense, which covered an area of 3 feet. She did not use her true qi. She began to rely only on her strength to fight with Zhong Xiaohu. After dozens of moves, Zhong Xiaohu's moves gradually became smooth and his control of his inner strength was also skillful. Above his head, a faint white mist gradually condensed into a line, which went straight up faintly. At this time, the sound of the 2 brothers fighting had already awakened the 2 people in the cave. Chang'e slowly walked out with the help of Chen Chen. Chang'e should have heard Chen Chen's explanation. Therefore, she only glanced at Zhong Xiaohua's face, which did not change much. Then she saw the white line on Zhong Xiaohu's head. Immediately, her face was full of horror. Her small cherry mouth was wide open at this time, but her eyes were full of joy. Chen Chen, on the other hand, looked at the 2 people who seemed to be fighting with their lives. He was somewhat puzzled. He held the black puppy in one hand and supported Chang'e in the other. He stood there very strangely. At this time, he heard Zhong Xiaohu shout, "Xiaohua, I'm going to use my full strength. If you can't block it, then move aside." As he spoke, he put his palms together and directly hit Zhong Xiaohua's chest with an earth-shattering force. How could Zhong Xiaohua dodge? She raised one arm and her palm horizontally, blocking Zhong Xiaohu's palms. At this time, she no longer used pure strength. She used some of her true qi and used the soaring dragon mantra on her arm. -3. Chapter 681. The soaring dragon cultivation method was indeed exquisite. Only 30% of his zhenqi was able to suppress Zhong Xiaohu's internal energy. When Zhong Xiaohu saw that Zhong Xiaohua was not afraid at all and was able to easily block his internal energy, his heart was filled with joy. Last night, Zhong Xiaohu used his internal energy to refine the effects of the meridian nourishing pill. Although he used an entire night of hard work, his foundation was still poor. He had only cultivated for 4 years, so by the time the sun rose, there was still a small portion of the medicinal effects that had not been refined. Furthermore, just the crimson flame pill alone was able to increase one's internal energy by 5 years. If it was refined using the immortal Dao method, it would be able to increase one's internal energy by 15 years. Zhong Xiaohua's internal energy had suddenly increased by 10 years for no reason. How could she freely control it? He took the opportunity to exchange pointers with Zhong Xiaohua. On one hand, he wanted to exercise his hands and feet. On the other hand, he wanted to use this opportunity to familiarize himself with the 10 years of internal energy that he had just obtained. Zhong Xiaohu originally wanted to slowly refine the remaining medicinal effects in his dantian in the future. However, now that he saw that Zhong Xiaohua was able to easily block his internal energy, a thought arose in his mind. Wasn't this a great opportunity to refine the remaining medicinal effects? Therefore, he immediately silently used the divine ethereal art and urged the medicinal effects in his dantian to rush into his meridians. Zhong Xiaohua saw that her second brother's internal energy had reached its peak and suddenly had new internal energy. She originally wanted to dissuade him, but she immediately understood. She smiled and said, "Second brother, so you still have some medicinal effects that you haven't refined. Then I'll give you a hand." After she finished speaking, she increased the amount of zhenqi in her hand. Seeing that Zhong Xiaohua was still able to speak in such a battle of internal energy, Zhong Xiaohu's heart felt more at ease. He urged the medicinal effects and directly rushed to his arm. Chang Ji and Chen Chen's expressions changed slightly when they saw the two of them directly fighting with their internal energy. Especially Chang Ji. When she saw Zhong Xiaohu's internal energy surge, she was afraid that he would accidentally injure Zhong Xiaohua. Now that she saw Zhong Xiaohua speak so easily, she let out a sigh of relief. She immediately thought about how she had descended from the sky yesterday and subdued the entire Bloodwolf pack. How could she be injured by Zhong Xiaohu's hands? After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Zhong Xiaohua felt that the internal energy coming from her second brother's hand. She immediately said, "Second brother, the medicinal effects should be completely refined. You should slowly withdraw your energy." When Zhong Xiaohu heard this, he did not dare to delay and slowly withdrew his internal energy. Fortunately, this was a battle between brothers. Zhong Xiaohu also knew that his younger brother would definitely not take the opportunity to attack. Otherwise, when he withdrew his internal energy, his opponent would take the opportunity to attack him. Even if he did not die, he would be seriously injured. When Zhong Xiaohu withdrew a portion of his internal energy, Zhong Xiaohua also withdrew a portion. After a while, both of their hands had no internal energy left. Zhong Xiaohu did not care about anything else. He immediately sat cross-legged with his palms facing the sky and quietly adjusted his internal energy. When Zhong Xiaohua saw this, she nodded slightly to Chang Ji and Chen Chen who were standing beside her. She stood beside Zhong Xiaohu and released her divine sense to protect him. Although Zhong Xiaohua did not practice internal energy, she knew the dangers involved. Back then, words such as qi deviation were always on the tip of her tongue. Now that she saw her second brother immediately adjusting his internal energy without asking anything, she knew the reason. Chang Ji's body had not yet recovered, so the responsibility of protecting him must be taken up by him. At this time, within Zhong Xiaohu's meridians, due to the impact of Zhong Xiaohua's powerful internal energy and his own deliberate indulgence, the last part of the medicinal effect of the meridian nourishing pill had been forcibly refined. The surging internal energy madly produced in Zhong Xiaohu's lower dantian and then rushed into the meridians in his body. Zhong Xiaohu was now like a weak child, trying to use his slender arms to control a small boat. He felt very powerless. Fortunately, his meridians had been transformed by the meridian nourishing pill last night. They were tougher and wider than most people's meridians. Under the impact of the huge internal energy, there was not the slightest damage. Under the galloping internal energy, there were even signs of the meridians faintly expanding. Zhong Xiaohu did not dare to be careless. He calmly guarded his heart and tried to control the somewhat crazy internal energy. It went along the meridians in his body, one cycle after another. Chang Ji, who stood to the side and did not speak, was more nervous than Zhong Xiaohu at this time. The internal energy in Zhong Xiaohu's meridians was frantic. From the outside, his face was constantly changing between green and red. The white qi that had been condensed into a line above his head was sometimes scattered and sometimes gathered. It was a sign of qi deviation. However, even though Chang Ji's fingernails were clenched into the flesh, she could not help Zhong Xiaohu in the slightest. At this moment, Chang Ji almost wanted to suffer for Zhong Xiaohu. Chang Ji felt that Zhong Xiaohu was in danger. Zhong Xiaohua, who had already released her divine sense, was one step ahead of him. She saw Zhong Xiaohua stretch out her finger, which was only a few inches away from Zhong Xiaohu's back. As long as she saw the slightest trace of inheritance, she would immediately point it out. However, Zhong Xiaohua herself was also clear that the internal energy cultivation should be the same as the true qi. Only when she could control it, it could be her own cultivation. If she had the help of others, her future achievements would inevitably be limited. Therefore, unless it was a last resort, the true qi on Zhong Xiaohua's finger could not be transferred. In another half a cup of tea's time, she did not know how many cycles the internal energy had run in Zhong Xiaohu's body. She only saw that Zhong Xiaohu's face was becoming more and more normal, and the white line condensed by the internal energy above his head was gradually condensed. It became more and more shaped, pointing straight to the sky. At this time, Zhong Xiaohua's finger quietly withdrew. In fact, she did not point this finger at the beginning. Zhong Xiaohua already knew in her heart that the most difficult moment had passed. In the future, Zhong Xiaohu could only be more skillful, and there was no need for her to intervene. Sure enough, in another half a cup of tea's time, the white line above Zhong Xiaohu's head gradually disappeared. Following that, Zhong Xiaohu opened his eyes, and his eyes were filled with surprise. When he woke up in the morning, he only roughly checked his internal energy. He only knew that it had increased by a lot, but as for how much, he did not have a direct idea. He immediately compared it with Zhong Xiaohua. At this time, he had refined the remaining medicinal power of the soothing pulse pill and combined it with the internal energy that had increased last night. At this time, he felt that the internal energy in his meridians was like a turbulent river, continuous and unending. It was a realm that he had never dreamed of before. When he raised his head and was about to ask Zhong Xiaohua, he saw a pair of watery eyes looking at him with concern. Immediately, his face revealed a gentle expression, and he said with a smile, "Are you okay?" Changa's face was slightly red, as if she was thinking of yesterday's charm and gentleness. She slightly lowered her head and said in a soft voice, "I'm okay. How about the injuries on your body? Does it still hurt?" "It didn't hurt a long time ago. The places where I was bitten by the blood wolf and the places where my bones were broken are all warm and itchy. I think it's because of the magic of Xiaohua's pill yesterday." Immediately, she said to Zhong Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, thank you. Second. Sister Changa, we're all family. Please don't mention the word thank you." This family did not know whether it was the Zhong family or the Misty school. In short, Changa was embarrassed to think too much. She looked at Zhong Xiaohu again and probed, "Xiaohua, just now when you were practicing martial arts with Xiaohua, it seems that your internal energy has improved a lot. And when you were practicing your internal energy, you actually condensed it into a line. This is the appearance of internal energy practicing to the perfection stage. You." Zhong Xiaohu talked about what happened yesterday and just now. He also said in a puzzled tone, "I feel that I have a lot of internal energy in my body, but I don't know to what extent I've practiced it." Changa laughed out loud. Zhong Xiaohu was telling the truth. He had only practiced internal energy for a few years. In addition to the changes in the Misty school, he didn't have a better practice environment. He didn't know a lot of basic knowledge. Of course, he didn't know to what extent he had practiced his internal energy. In fact, even Zhong Xiaohua didn't know this question. If he answered, it would only be a number from Rejuvenation Valley. Come here and let me see. Chang'e nodded. Zhong Xiaohu obediently walked in front of Chang'e and stretched out his hand. Chang'e stretched out her hand and a stream of internal energy entered Zhong Xiaohu's meridians. As the internal energy went deeper, Chang'e's face was first filled with surprise, but it slowly turned into confusion. She frowned slightly. Seeing Chang'e like this, Zhong Xiaohu was also nervous. When Chang'e finally withdrew her hand, he immediately asked, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong?" Zhong Xiaohua, who was beside him, was also watching anxiously. He didn't want to ruin his second brother's cultivation with his good intentions. Chang'e pondered for a moment and said hesitantly, "There's nothing wrong. It just feels a little strange." Chen Chen also said, "Senior sister, is it that the appearance of senior brother condensing his qi into a line is different from his actual cultivation?" "Yes, it's like that." Chang'e nodded and said, "When the internal energy is condensed into a line, it should be more than 30 years of internal energy cultivation. How many years have you been cultivating? How can you have such an achievement? However, the internal energy in your meridians is abundant. Although it's not 30 years, it should still be more than 20 years of internal energy cultivation." "Ah!" Zhong Xiaohu was dumbfounded and said with his mouth wide open, "Chang'e, are you sure you didn't see wrong? I actually have more than 20 years of cultivation." Chang'e still nodded. "I've been cultivating internal energy for more than 10 years. Although I don't know what 30 years of internal energy cultivation is like, I've heard about it from Master. Previously, you worked hard to cultivate and made rapid progress. 4 years of hard work is equivalent to 7 years of other people's internal energy cultivation. However, after I didn't see you for a night, I woke up and found that your cultivation is something I can't even catch up to." As she spoke, a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Zhong Xiaohu knew that his cultivation had improved greatly, but he didn't expect it to be such a huge improvement. This good news made him feel a little dizzy. He could only open his mouth and smile foolishly. Zhong Xiaohua next to him asked, "Sister Chang'e, my second brother's internal energy has improved by leaps and bounds. Is there anything wrong with it?" -3. Chapter 682. Of course, Chang'e pursed her lips and smiled. "Actually, as Chen Chen said just now, your second brother's internal strength should be more than 30 years, but his real internal strength is only 20 years. This is what I was puzzled about. Of course, this situation also shows that as long as Xiaohu works hard, the difference of 10 years can be achieved very quickly. In other words, my second brother doesn't need to spend another 10 years of hard work to achieve the internal strength that other people need 10 years to achieve. That should be the case." Chang'e nodded. Zhong Xiaohua pondered for a moment and asked, "Then what if my second brother gains another 30 years of internal strength?" "Ah! What? This? How is this possible?" The three of them were very surprised and cried out at the same time. Chang'e opened her eyes wide and said, "Xiaohua, the thing you gave Xiaohu, is it the legendary magical pill that increases internal strength?" Do you have the same kind of pill?" Then, without waiting for Zhong Xiaohua to nod, she explained, "Maybe you don't know, this kind of pill that increases internal strength, although it's good, seems to be very harmful to the meridians. Think about it, it's a narrow road for a person to walk on. If you suddenly let 3 rows of carriages walk side by side, there will definitely be a big problem. I think that the signs of Xiaohu's qi deviation just now are because his meridians can't adapt to the huge amount of internal strength. Then doesn't that mean that no one dares to take the pill that increases internal strength?" Zhong Xiaohua knew that Chang'e's guess was wrong, but she still asked curiously, This situation is because your second brother has just started cultivating inner force. If he has been cultivating for a long time, like our Misty sect's sect leader OU, which one of them hasn't been immersed in inner force for dozens of years? Their meridians have been tempered to be incomparably tough. This sudden increase in inner force makes it easier to control." "Oh, so it's like that." Zhong Xiaohua somewhat understood, of course, his heart was more at ease. What was the meridian nourishing pill for? It was to nourish and refine the meridians. After Zhong Xiaohu took the meridian nourishing pill, the meridians in his body were definitely comparable to masters who practiced for dozens of years. Then, Chang'e said, "There's another problem. Each kind of pill is only effective for the first time. If you continue to take it, the effect will be greatly reduced. I think if you give Xiaohu the same pill, it won't increase his internal strength for more than 10 years. At most, it's 3 to 5 years." Zhong Xiaohua was still unwilling to give up and asked, "Then, what if it's a different type of pill?" This. Chang'e looked at Zhong Xiaohua as if he was looking at a monster. In Jianghu, he had only heard of the elixir that could increase one's power, but he had never seen it. Even in the ethereal sect, he had only picked up some spirit herbs from the secret land and refined some elixirs that could increase his power. However, this was not something that Chang'e could know. Moreover, as long as one could get this kind of elixir, he didn't know how much merit he had accumulated in his previous life. When Chang'e saw that Zhong Xiaohu's internal strength suddenly increased by dozens of years, of course, he thought that Zhong Xiaohua only had one elixir. Then, Zhong Xiaohua asked again, and Chang'e naturally thought that maybe there were two. This possibility was the limit of Chang'e's imagination. At this time, when he heard that there was another kind of elixir that could increase internal strength, Chang'e almost thought that he was dreaming, or Zhong Xiaohua was joking. Although Chen Chen's kung fu was not as good as Chang'e's, and her knowledge was not as good as Chang'e's, she had heard about this kind of magical elixir. At this time, she couldn't help but curl her lips and say, "Zhong Xiaohua, you really know how to brag." Zhong Xiaohua laughed. When he was about to speak, his heart suddenly thumped. He thought of the joke Zhong Xiaohua made yesterday, sword light. Sword light was not something that could be done with more than 20 years of internal strength. Since Zhong Xiaohua said so yesterday, could it be? Zhong Xiaohua looked at his second brother, his future second sister-in-law, and then at the petite Chen Chen who had a look of disbelief on her face. Zhong Xiaohua smiled. If they could not be trusted, then who else in this world could be trusted? So, Zhong Xiaohua nodded with a smile. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua's affirmative action, Chang'e almost felt that all his cognition was about to change. Everything could happen to this child in his impression. Well, she somewhat forgot that yesterday before she fainted, she saw the immortal falling from the sky. Do you really have other elixirs that can increase internal strength? Even Chen Chen felt that his mouth and tongue were dry, and he still didn't believe it. Zhong Xiaohua raised his chin and somewhat disdained to answer. Chen Chen stamped his foot and used his shoulder to support Chang'e. Chang'e didn't care about their business. She just thought for a while and said, "Even if I have other elixirs, it's not suitable for Xiaohu to take them at this time." Seeing Zhong Xiaohua and his brother's puzzlement, Chen Chen next to them said, "On the first day of practicing internal strength, didn't Master say that the most important thing to practice internal strength is to take one step at a time? Don't bite off more than you can chew. Senior brother has got more than 20 years of internal strength, but he hasn't mastered it well. Just now, he almost went mad. If he suddenly increases his internal strength, won't it be more difficult to control it? Let's wait until senior brother carefully understands the internal strength that he got for free and can use it freely." After that, she rolled her eyes at Zhong Xiaohua and said, "You don't even know this. What did your master teach you?" Zhong Xiaohua secretly sighed and said, "It's so good to have a master. If it weren't for Chang'e and Chen Chen, I would have done something bad with good intentions." Then she cupped her hands and said, "Thank you for your explanation, Master Chen. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known. Thank you for your advice." Bah! Chen Chen spat and her expression was very similar to Nai Qianyu's. But soon her expression changed and was completely different from Nai Qianyu's. She said shyly, "Senior brother can't take it today. Don't you want to give me one of the elixirs for the sake of my explanation?" Then she stretched out her chubby little hand. "Oh, okay." Hearing this, Zhong Xiaohua didn't hesitate at all. She took out a jade bottle and poured 2 elixirs into Chen Chen's hand. "Ah!" Chen Chen was stunned and said, You're really giving it to me?" Then she smelled it and then laughed. "Zhong Xiaohua, what kind of elixir is this? It doesn't smell like medicine at all." Are you trying to fool a little boy? He, I know this elixir is precious, but I'm just teasing you. If you don't want to give it to me, I won't give it to you. Why do you give me a fake elixir? You even gave me 2 of them. It shows that you're generous. Zhong Xiaohua touched her nose and said, one is for you, and the other is for Sister Chang'e. He, you even want to fool senior sister. Chen still didn't believe it. Chen, Zhong Xiaohu next to her scolded, don't make trouble with Xiaohua. Last night, Xiaohua gave me this elixir. Chen had always been Chang'e's little tail, and now she was naturally taken care of by Zhong Xiaohu. She didn't dare to disobey Zhong Xiaohu's words and didn't dare to not believe them. Hearing Zhong Xiaohu's words, she couldn't help trembling in her hands, and the 2 made nourishing elixirs almost fell to the ground. She stammered, Zhong Xiaohua, you really want to give this elixir to me and to senior sister? Zhong Xiaohua saw that Chen was defeated, and she was secretly happy. She nodded and said, a gentleman keeps his word. If I say it's for you, it's for you. Chang'e next to her said, no, it's so precious. Before she finished her words, Chen pulled her arm and said reluctantly, senior sister, this is 20 years worth of power. Zhong Xiaohu also coughed a few times, stared at Chang'e, and said, Xiaohua gave it to you. Just take it. Don't talk nonsense. Hearing this, Chang'e was a little angry, but her face was flushed. She didn't know that everything yesterday was clearly seen by Zhong Xiaohua in the air. She had been putting on airs and thinking that she was Zhong Xiaohu's senior sister. At this time, when she was scolded by Zhong Xiaohu, everything was exposed. How could she not be angry out of shame? Alas, it was just that she didn't realize it herself. When she talked about Zhong Xiaohu just now, she called him Xiaohu, and didn't hear her call him junior brother Zhong. Then, Chang'e was a little shy and said, since it's Xiaohua's good intention, I won't be polite. In fact, I also want it very much. Seeing that Chang'e was not different from the old Chang'e, Zhong Xiaohua was very happy. She looked at her second brother who was smiling foolishly next to her and really despised him. Then, Xiaohua, do you still have? Chang'e asked very hesitantly, but she couldn't even finish her sentence. Zhong Xiaohua immediately understood and said with a smile, Sister Chang'e, do you think I have many of these pills? And even if I do, can I let others know except for you? Chang'e nodded and didn't ask any more questions. That's right, senior sister. My martial arts in the sect aren't high to begin with. Only after I take this pill can I show them my prowess. If they all take it and their martial arts are higher than mine, what fun would there be? Zhong Xiaohu also nodded and took a step forward. We must be careful about this matter. We must not let others know about it, especially the people from the fragrant cult. I heard that the destruction of our misty sect seemed to be related to this matter. We must not repeat the same mistake. I know, senior brother. Chen said softly, I'm not that stupid. Chang'e naturally nodded. Then Zhong Xiaohu asked, Xiaohua, when is it suitable for Chang'e and Chen to take these pills? Will Chang'e's injury affect them? Zhong Xiaohua thought for a moment and asked, Sister Chang'e, the bones in your arm are broken and now I'm fixing them. Don't you know that it will affect your internal strength? Chang'e smiled and said, when I woke up just now, I already tried it. It didn't affect me much. Well, that's good. Zhong Xiaohua said, it's best to take it after the bones are healed, but it's okay to take it now. When Zhong Xiaohu heard this, he immediately urged, then what are you hesitating for? If Chang'e's arm is healed after 100 days, won't it take a few months? Not to mention that Xiaohua may not be cheap, even the environment of our Misty Hall is not suitable to take this kind of pill. Everything should be done in the Yulan Grand Canyon. Zhong Xiaohu, on the other hand, was more anxious than Chang'e. -3. Chapter 683. Zhong Xiaohua didn't understand the meaning of Zhong Xiaohu's words. She only thought that the situation of Shushin Peak was the same as what she had heard from Bai Huan, which was under the supervision of the fragrance cult. It was definitely inappropriate to help Chang'e and Chen improve their skills. So she nodded and said, second brother is right. I am now a little pharmacist in the Tuoden Hall, and I stay in Tianmu Peak. It is unrealistic to go to your Shushin Peak. Sister Changa's meridians are smooth, and her arms are not affected too much. Tuoden Hall? Little pharmacist. Tianmu Peak. The three people were even more surprised and exclaimed. They had been in the fragrance cult for a long time and were clear about the affairs of the fragrance cult. When they were about to ask in detail, Zhong Xiaohua waved her hand and said, "Let's not talk about the specific story. It's too long. You just need to know." Then she looked at the sky and said, "Anyway, it will take a long time to refine orchid dusk. We might as well stay here for one more day and take the elixir." Chang'e didn't answer and looked up at Zhong Xiaohu. 20 years of skills was like a pie falling from the sky. If Chang'e wasn't tempted, it was definitely not true. However, since yesterday, the window paper between Chang'e and Zhong Xiaohu was broken. Chang'e was no longer just Zhong Xiaohu's senior sister. Chang'e still had to listen to Zhong Xiaohu's opinion on some things. It had to be said that Chang'e was really a nice person. Before Zhong Xiaohu said anything, Chen Chen was happy. She pulled out her hand holding Chang'e and snapped her fingers, shouting, "Zhong Xiaohua, you are great." Zhong Xiaohu wouldn't stop her. He looked at Chang'e and said, "Xiaohua is right. We still have time, so we might as well do it here." Then she turned her head and asked, "Xiaohua, shall we take it now?" "Well, there's no time to lose. Let's go to the cave and let Sister Chang'e take it first, then let Chen Chen take it." Hearing Zhong Xiaohua call her Chen Chen again, Chen Chen was a little unhappy. "Zhong Xiaohua, I'm your senior sister. Why do you call Chang'e senior sister and call me by my name?" This. Looking at Chen Chen, who was a full head shorter than him, Zhong Xiaohua really did not know whether she was older or younger than him. Back then, at the Ethereal Villa Martial Arts exhibition, he had only seen Chen Chen once. At that time, Chen Chen was not much taller than him. Moreover, she also had a round face with baby fat, so it was impossible to tell her age. How could he call her senior sister? Thus, Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, "Shouldn't a girl's age be kept a secret?" Chen Chen was stunned and didn't know what Zhong Xiaohua meant. He nodded and said, "Yes. What's wrong?" "So, I don't know your age and you can't tell me. Since you're younger than me, you can't escape from being called junior sister. However, between junior sister and Chen Chen, which name will you choose?" Chen Chen was anxious and cried, "How can you call me junior sister?" Zhong Xiaohua shrugged and said with a smile, "So, I call you Chen Chen? What's wrong with that?" This. Chen Chen was a little confused and didn't understand what was wrong. Chang'e stood beside Chen Chen with a smile on the corner of her mouth. Since she came to the fragrance cult, it was very difficult for Chang'e to have such a smile on her face. However, she had laughed more in the past 2 days than in the previous years. At this moment, there was a wolf howl at the foot of the mountain. Everyone looked in the direction of the howl and saw that it was the new Blood Wolf King leading dozens of blood wolves. Soon, the wolf pack came to the foot of the mountain. The Blood Wolf King went straight up the mountain and the other blood wolves quickly walked to the side of the previous blood wolves. The blood wolves from last night all howled and ran in the direction of the Blood Wolf King. When the Blood Wolf King came up to the hill, Zhong Xiaohua couldn't help but frown. She hadn't seen the Blood Wolf King for a night and there seemed to be some changes. Zhong Xiaohua couldn't see many subtle changes, but the original brown fur had gradually turned yellow and there was a golden luster, which Zhong Xiaohua could see clearly. Maybe, the new Blood Wolf King drank the blood of the previous Blood Wolf King yesterday, so the new Blood Wolf King changed like this. Zhong Xiaohua understood. Blood Wolf. Maybe this is the meaning of the word blood. The Blood Wolf King came to Zhong Xiaohua's side and circled around Zhong Xiaohua, then walked to Chen Chen. Chen Chen knew that the Blood Wolf King wouldn't hurt her, but after all, she was still afraid. Although Chang'e heard about it from Chen Chen in the morning, now that she saw it, she couldn't help trembling with fear. Zhong Xiaohua saw this and quickly caught up with the Blood Wolf King. She took the black puppy from Chen Chen and said, "You help Sister Chang'e back to the cave first. You two stay a little further away. Don't be in a hurry to take the blood. Regulate your internal force and wait for me to go in and take it." I'll help you to dissolve the medicine. Changa and Changa couldn't wait to leave, so they just casually agreed and walked away. The black puppy, which was not much bigger than little Martin, was held by Zhong Xiaohua with one hand. It was still like little Martin, with its eyes tightly closed. The Blood Wolf King came closer, but stopped when it was about 3 steps away. It respectfully squatted on the ground and quietly watched. Zhong Xiaohua touched the black puppy's smooth and shiny fur and said with a smile, "Brother Wolf, don't be so polite. Little Martin is still asleep and can't see you." The Blood Wolf King didn't quite understand, so it only growled a few times and still sat upright. Zhong Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "Although you can't speak, I guess you're here to guard little Martin. Then you should carefully squat here. I have something to do in the cave. If you don't come in, don't come in." After that, she said to Zhong Xiaohu, "Let's go, second brother. Let's also enter the cave. With the Blood Wolf King guarding the entrance for us, which beast in the Yulan Grand Canyon would dare to disturb us?" The two laughed and entered the cave. The Blood Wolf King was still squatting there, quietly and without making a sound. Inside the cave, Changa and Chen Chen sat on opposite sides with their eyes closed. Zhong Xiaohua looked at the black puppy and handed it to Zhong Xiaohu. "You hold it, second brother. This is our protective talisman in the Yulan Grand Canyon." Zhong Xiaohu was startled. He carefully took it from Zhong Xiaohua's hands and said, "Xiaohua, what do you mean? How come I don't understand? This puppy looks like it hasn't reached full term. Maybe it will die in a while. How can it be our protective talisman?" After thinking for a moment, Zhong Xiaohua said, "Forget it, it's nothing. Second brother, you just hold it." Zhong Xiaohu nodded. This black puppy was so pitiful. What was the big deal about carefully holding it? While they were talking, Chen Chen and Changa opened their eyes at the same time and said, "Xiaohua, you've done 3 cycles of internal energy. Is it okay?" "Yes, it's okay. Sister Changa, are your meridians blocked?" Changa smiled and said, "Before I fell into a coma yesterday, the internal energy in my meridians was exhausted and I was seriously injured. However, there was no blockage. After taking your elixir, I checked it just now and it's much better." "Very good." Zhong Xiaohua nodded and said to Chen Chen, "I'll help Sister Changa dissolve the medicine first." "Wait a moment." "Okay." Chen Chen got up and handed a soothing pulse pill to Changa. Changa took it with her uninjured hand and looked at Zhong Xiaohua. "Then I'm convinced." Zhong Xiaohua smiled and nodded slightly. Changa looked at Zhong Xiaohu again and put the soothing pulse pill into her mouth. Just like Zhong Xiaohu, the refreshing fragrance of the medicine immediately spread out from her mouth and a warm current rushed into her meridians. Changa didn't dare to delay and immediately used her internal energy to guide the warm current along her meridians into her lower dantian. Zhong Xiaohua also transferred her internal energy into Changa's meridians at the beginning. Although Changa's meridians hadn't been nourished and transformed by starlight, her internal energy had been tempered by the Misty School for more than 10 years. Zhong Xiaohua wrapped the soothing pulse pill with her internal energy and slowly released its efficacy. Changa's meridians were also repaired and tempered inch by inch under the effect of the soothing pulse pill. After an unknown period of time, Changa had run her internal breath 3 times. At this time, the efficacy of the meridian moistening pill had refined her tendons and meridians 3 times. The width and toughness of her tendons and meridians had changed dramatically. However, Changa's tendons and meridians were weaker than Zhong Xiaohu's. Therefore, the meridian moistening pill's transformation of her tendons and meridians was still inferior to Zhong Xiaohu's. Even the remaining efficacy was much more than Zhong Xiaohu's. Zhong Xiaohua sighed in his heart. He retracted his zhunqi and whispered, "Elder Sister Changa, I've already helped you absorb a portion of the pill's medicinal strength. The rest will depend on you. However, don't be like my second brother and absorb it all at once. It's best if you absorb it bit by bit." Changa's internal energy cultivation compared to Zhong Xiaohu's was like the difference between heaven and earth. How could she not understand this principle? Without waiting for Zhong Xiaohua to finish speaking, Zhong Xiaohu immediately activated his Heart Sutra and began to refine it bit by bit. Even Zhong Xiaohu's control and precision of Zhong Changa's internal energy was something that Zhong Xiaohu could not match. Seeing that Chang'e had begun to refine the remaining efficacy of the pill, Zhong Xiaohua walked to Chen Chen's side and helped him transform his meridians. Needless to say, Chen Chen's meridians were much worse than Chang'e's. His meridians were narrow and fragile. Zhong Xiaohua had to be more careful in controlling the release of the efficacy of the pill. She was afraid that Chen Chen's meridians would swell and burst. After 3 cycles of transformation, the remaining efficacy of the Nourishing Meridians pill in Chen Chen's lower dantian was more than Chang'e's. Zhong Xiaohua smiled bitterly. It seemed that this pill that increased power had different effects on different people. Just this Nourishing Meridians pill alone had so much efficacy that it could not be used up. Then what about the qi-generating pill? Zhong Xiaohua had temporarily given up the idea of letting them take the qi-generating pill. For Chen Chen, Zhong Xiaohua did not dare to withdraw her internal energy immediately. Instead, she waited for Chen Chen to refine a little bit of the efficacy of the pill. After she knew that there would be no problems, she withdrew it. She said to Zhong Xiaohu, who had been watching from the side, "Well, second brother, I've done what I can do. What's left is to refine the efficacy of the pill. I think second brother also knows this. As for how many years of power it can increase, that depends on each person's fate." Then, he took the little black dog from Zhong Xiaohu's hands and said in a low voice, "Second brother, you should also quickly adjust your breathing. If you can properly control the power of these 20 years before we leave the valley, we can do it for a few more decades." Zhong Xiaohu was stunned. He had always heard that inner strength was cultivated by oneself. Why did Zhong Xiaohua say that it was obtained? -3. Chapter 684. In the blue sky, the sun hung high in the sky. The huge halo around it shot out 7 colors. The whole sun was several times bigger than usual. On the great serene orchid prairie, a cool breeze still blew, causing the knee-high grass to sway left and right. Elk, antelope, grass rabbits, and the like were all leisurely nibbling on the grass and drinking water. When they were happy, they would even jump and run around as if they were in a good mood. Everything was peaceful. Suddenly, on the east side of the prairie near a mountain, the small animals stopped and straightened their ears. Then, they all ran as far as they could, sometimes looking back as if something terrible had happened. Not long after, a group of tall blood wolves came from the distance. But strangely, they ignored the small animals and walked slowly, unhurriedly. This grassland was originally the territory of elk and other animals. Blood wolves were rare here, and it was really thought-provoking that they swaggered so openly. What was even more strange was that in the middle of the group of blood wolves, there were 4 carriages pulled by elk. Of the 4 carriages, only the first one had a tall and thin young man sitting lazily in the driver's seat. But he also closed his eyes and sat cross-legged. He didn't hold a whip. As long as the elk pulling the carriage deviated slightly or slacked off, a blood wolf would immediately run out from the wolf pack. With a sweep of its broom-sized tail, the elk would immediately change direction and obediently walk forward. The young man driving the carriage didn't need to do anything. The 3 carriages followed closely behind. The curtains were blown open, and there were some boxes inside. There was no one inside. At this time, not far from the cliff, a large group of jackdaws seemed to be alarmed by the advancing blood wolves. They cawed and sat cross-legged in the air in front of the carriage. They didn't fly away, as if attracted by something. From the side of the first carriage, a blood wolf with light golden fur quickly rushed out. The young man in the carriage let out a low growl and quickly rushed forward. At this time, a clear female voice came from the carriage. "Zhong Xiaohua, why are there jackdaws in front?" Along the way, although we saw many dried bloodstains, there were no corpses left. Jackdaws that specialize in pecking at carrion have never existed before. The young man opened his eyes and said, "Chen Chen, this is the first time I've seen this jackdaw. How can I answer you? Won't we know when the Bloodwolf King returns? What can the Bloodwolf King say to you? Why don't we go up and take a look? If it's not Elk's corpse, then it's a disciple of the aroma sect. It's better to have a complete corpse so that we can reincarnate well. A calm female voice said, Xiaohua, don't keep telling Xiaohua what to do. Now that you've refined the medicinal power of the pills, your internal energy cultivation is much higher than ours. It's time for you to go and take a look. Let second brother rest. He'll pass by in a while. We'll just bury him. The four of them were Zhong Xiaohua and her companions. That day, Zhong Xiaohua helped Chang'e and Chen Chen take the meridian nourishing pill to transform the meridians in their bodies. He left them another day and night to refine the remaining medicinal power. However, that was nearly 20 years of internal strength after all. It was not something that could be completed in a short period of time. The next day, Chang'e suggested that they go back. Although there was no danger in the Yulan Canyon, it was not a safe place. Therefore, no one had any objections. In the beginning, the four of them were like before, riding on ferocious beasts. However, when they passed by the forest where Zhong Xiaohu and the rest had first encountered the blood wolf, Chang'e's heart skipped a beat. There were more than 50 people from the Misty Hall and they had already picked a lot of spiritual herbs. These were things that the hall urgently needed. If they were to be left here, then the dozens of lives that were left here would be worthless. Therefore, she wanted to bring back the dozens of carriages in the forest. This idea was beautiful, but how could it be justified? Even if the four of them had the elk, how could they bring back dozens of carriages? The disciples of the fragrance cult would not think that the beasts in the Yulan Canyon had changed to eating grass. In fact, even if the four of them each drove a carriage, it would be surprising. Zhong Xiaohua had raised an objection at that time. However, Zhong Xiaohu knew that the Misty Hall was short of these spiritual herbs. Moreover, they were the painstaking efforts of the dead disciples. If they did not bring them back, it would be really painful. Therefore, the three of them weighed the pros and cons. Well, except for Zhong Xiaohua, they collected the most precious spiritual herbs in the 4 carriages and let the blood wolf capture 4 elk to pull the carriages. Thus, there were now 4 large carriages. Of the dozens of spiritual herbs in the carriages, only 4 could be taken away. Chang'e and the others were of course very regretful. Just when they were about to leave the woods with extreme disappointment, Zhong Xiaohua found an excuse to leave for a moment. She returned to the woods and put the rest of the spiritual herbs into her belt. After all, Zhong Xiaohua had to spend a lot of effort to explain how she could ride the wind. In the end, it was not easy to convince them that as long as she practiced the ethereal steps to the 9th level, she could do it. This belt could store so many things, perhaps even the divine skills of the Misty School could not explain it. Of course, Chen Chen was very curious and asked, "How did you get the ethereal steps?" While Zhong Xiaohua fondly remembered Oyu Peng, Master Oyu, she also told her that this was a secret that Zhong Xiaohua and Oyu Peng could not tell her. Zhong Xiaohua knew that Zhong Xiaohua had obtained the 3rd level of the ethereal steps, so now, after listening to Zhong Xiaohua's words, he was convinced. Therefore, Chen Chen pestered Zhong Xiaohua again to tell her what happened after Zhong Xiaohua was in Shitsue Mountain. She only regarded Zhong Xiaohua as a hero and her eyes were full of stars. "I'm helpless, helpless." Thinking about how her mouth was dry from talking with Zhong Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Chen Chen these days, Zhong Xiaohua felt a lingering fear. This trick of making up a story can only be done by those literati. "I'm a rough person, so I can't do it. I was almost exposed several times, but I'm quite skilled at it after making it up a few times. When we get out of Chuanxiang cult, we can also play with literature and write a few books about chivalry and earn some money." In fact, Zhong Xiaohua did not want to tell the whole story to her second brother and her future sister-in-law. After all, her eldest brother and sister-in-law also knew about it. She could not favor one and discriminate against the other. However, thinking of the dungeon on Baiyufeng, Zhong Xiaohua had a bad feeling. In such a dangerous place, it was better to keep a secret. She was not only responsible for herself, but also for her relatives. These days, the journey was also leisurely. Zhong Xiaohu had basically adapted to the newly added 20 years' worth of skills. When he occasionally sparred with Zhong Xiaohua, he would not reveal the white line on the top of his head. The wind between his fists and feet was also slowly restrained, gradually returning to the original state. In terms of refining the medicinal power, Chang'e and Chen Chen were not as good as Zhong Xiaohu. They could only refine a small part of the remaining medicinal power every day. This was related to the foundation of their meridians and also because they were women. However, they were not in a hurry. After all, they were from a famous family. They knew that the slower they refined, the more solid their foundation would be. Moreover, in just a few days, they had gained several years' worth of skills. They could not even dream of it, so how could they have other thoughts? Therefore, along the way, only Zhong Xiaohua sat in front of the carriage, seemingly driving the carriage. The others hid in the carriage and worked hard. At this time, they had already left the mountain ridge and entered the Yulan Prairie. If there were no accidents, they would reach the mouth of the Yulan Canyon in 2 or 3 days. Thinking of this, Zhong Xiaohua could not help but feel a little depressed. Second brother was found, and he was in good condition. Her task of passing on the incense cult had been completed. Perhaps, the next step should be to cultivate at the top of Tianmu Peak. After all, after seeing the abilities of Huang Feng and the Bloodwolf King, her cultivation of the middle qi refining stage was really a little weak. Suddenly, Zhong Xiaohu walked out of the carriage and approached Zhong Xiaohua. He whispered, "What's wrong? Are you thinking about that little fishy of yours?" Zhong Xiaohua was surprised. She curled her lips and said, "Second brother, we haven't seen each other for a few years. You've made great progress. Do you think everyone is like you? Once you see elder sister Chang'e, you'll lose your soul and even call out her name in your dreams. Little Fishy and I have a pure relationship of brother and sister. Hehe, Xiaohua, you're not young anymore. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Haven't you heard of the saying in Lingering Fragrance Peak, guard against fire, theft, and senior brothers? It's referring to senior brothers like you who talk about pure relationships with others." Zhong Xiaohua was dumbfounded. She said, "How can there be such an interesting saying? I've never heard of it." "Oh, that's right. You've only been here for less than 2 months. No wonder you haven't heard of it." Zhong Xiaohu suddenly understood. He then said, "Hehe, if you tell your second brother the secret of using the sword, I'll let your second sister-in-law talk to Little Fishy about it." Gosh tilde Zhong Xiaohua finally understood what her second brother was planning. Zhong Xiaohu was the only one who knew about the dream-chasing sword. Zhong Xiaohua had never mentioned it in front of him. However, Zhong Xiaohu had only seen such a magical thing in the legends of chivalry. He had been itching for it for a long time. Seeing that Zhong Xiaohua did not mention it, he knew that it was an extremely secretive thing. He did not ask about it in front of her and only asked secretly. Zhong Xiaohua only used some gimmicks to coax him. How could Zhong Xiaohu be fooled? Therefore, as long as he found an opportunity, he would come up and coerce her. "Hehe, second brother, if that's the case, I'll tell this to my second sister-in-law. You're Chen Chen's senior brother. Shouldn't Chen Chen also guard against you?" You tilde Zhong Xiaohu's face turned red. Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, "Don't ask about this matter. You should focus on cultivating the Misty 7 swords and use the Jade Water Sword to form the Sword Light. Then, you can go anywhere you want in this world." Speaking of the Jade Water Sword, Zhong Xiaohu took it out from his bosom and caressed it lovingly. He smiled and said, "Forget it. Seeing that you've given me a treasured sword, I won't force you. However, if you want to force the sword out, you'll need at least 50 years of cultivation." While they were talking, the Bloodwolf King howled and ran over from a distance. Hearing the sound, Zhong Xiaohua was stunned. "Second brother, is there something up ahead?" There are more chapters. -3. Chapter 685. Zhong Xiaohu thought for a moment and nodded. "That's right, we are not loved by our grandparents, and no one cares about us. This is a good excuse." Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, "The key is that you should have strong martial arts, but I shouldn't have strong martial arts. So you can be my saviors." Then her eyes lit up and said, "I can use this excuse to visit you at Shushan Peak. Isn't this the best of both worlds?" "Good, This matter is settled. It's just a word. Right, speaking of female disciples, it seems that Shuyu Hall doesn't have any female disciples, but Chenkuan Hall seems to have some. But I don't know if any of the female disciples of Chenkuan Hall came this time. Well, there are also female inner sect disciples and inner sect alchemy disciples. When I was in the trial, I saw a female inner sect alchemy disciple. It's unlikely that there are female inner sect disciples. Their martial arts are very high, so how could they fall into this ordinary Yulan Twilight Canyon? If it's possible, then she must be one of the inner sect alchemy disciples you mentioned. Zhong Xiaohua nodded. Zhong Xiaohu's analysis was not wrong. Judging from the woman's meridians and residual internal force, this woman's martial arts were about the same as the inner sect alchemy disciple Zhong Pinga. Perhaps they both came to the Yulan Grand Canyon to collect rare spiritual herbs. Only the two of them could run around in this Yulan Grand Canyon. Zhong Pinga's luck was good. She had bumped into him 3 times, which was why she didn't turn into beast dung early on. This woman's luck was slightly worse. She bumped into him before she died. The more she thought about it, the more reasonable it was. At this time, Chen Chen shouted, 2 scholars, we have finished our work. Should we carry her to the front of the carriage? Chang Ji's arm was injured and was fixed by Zhong Xiaohua. Most of the cleaning and dressing was done by Chen Chen. At this time, her forehead was already sweating. Zhong Xiaohua turned around and walked to the woman's side. He looked at her face that had already been washed. The 2 eye sockets were very miserable without any eyeballs. He took out a handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped it around her eyes. He said, wait a moment. I still have to straighten the bones in her head. Then she said to Zhong Xiaohu, second brother, help me get some straight branches. I have to fix this woman's broken bones. Saying this, she covered the woman's head with her hand and lifted it up. As Zhong Xiaohua's right hand left, the woman's hair fell off, revealing a pale and blood-stained scalp. Zhong Xiaohua put her hand on the head again and silently used her genuine qi to move the displaced skull back to its original position. Then she took water from Chen Chen and carefully washed the head, applying the blood coagulation pill. At this time, Zhong Xiaohu took the branches back. Zhong Xiaohua fixed the woman's thighs and arms one by one. Finally, she took out a jade bottle from her bosom and wanted to pour out a bone coagulation pill. But when she held it in her hand, she muttered. After thinking for a while, she took it back and took out another jade bottle from her bosom. She poured out 2 pills and fed them to the woman. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua clapping his hands and looking like he was done, the 3 beside him heaved a sigh of relief. They were very lucky to have met Zhong Xiaohua. If it weren't for him, they would have lost their lives. Even if they had come here and met this dying female disciple, they probably wouldn't have been able to help even if they wanted to. However, Chen Chen was very surprised to see that Zhong Xiaohua could take out different kinds of pills from her bosom and asked, how many pills do you have? He. Zhong Xiaohua looked unfathomable. I can't tell you. I can't tell you. Chang'e asked, what kind of pills did you give her? Is it the bone coagulation pill? Why did you change it in the middle? Zhong Xiaohua shook her head. No, it's the small bone coagulation pill. Then she explained, she is an inner disciple. This bone coagulation pill is not from the fragrance cult. If it is found by her teacher, it seems that we can't explain it. Although we want to save her, we can't get ourselves involved. Well, Sister Chang'e, don't worry. Although these 2 small bone coagulation pills are not as good as the bone coagulation pill, they are enough. They are not from the fragrance cult. Chen Chen and Chang'e were stunned. Seeing that they were a little stunned, Zhong Xiaohua said with a smile, Sister Chang'e, you and Chen Chen can tidy up the second carriage. Put more dry and soft things on it. I'll send her to the carriage now. Okay. Chang'e and Chen Chen woke up from their dream and hurried back to tidy up. Soon, they waved their hands in the carriage. Zhong Xiaohua knew that everything was ready. She silently ran her genuine qi and cast several incantations to fix the woman's body. Then she stretched out her arms to hold the woman steadily and slowly sent her to the carriage. After everything was done, the 4 of them got on the carriage again. Chen Chen didn't forget to ask, Is she alone in the carriage behind? Do you need me to keep an eye on her? Zhong Xiaohua smiled. No, if there is no big change, she will not wake up for 10 days or half a month. You can't do anything by her side. Chen Chen's face was full of longing. She said, Zhong Xiaohua, your medical skills are really good. Did you learn from Nai Xiaoyu? Gosh tilde Zhong Xiaohua's face was full of black lines. She regretted telling them too much. Then she said angrily, I learned from her senior brother. Well, let's not talk about it. We still have to hurry, but we have to slow down in the future. Don't let the carriage be too bumpy. It will probably take one more day. Hihi, one more day is one more day. Chen Chen picked up the little black dog from the carriage and looked at the blood wolves surrounding the carriage. There were also some other beasts around. She said with a smile, with these beasts protecting us, I'll just treat it as a spring walk. Of course, with Zhong Xiaohua's protection and the protection of hundreds of blood wolves around the carriage, Chen Chen and the others were naturally not in any danger. 5 days later, they steadily approached the mouth of the Yulan Grand Canyon. Seeing the mouth of the canyon, Zhong Xiaohua didn't dare to let the blood wolves go any further. If the people of the fragrance cult saw a pack of blood wolves escorting them, wouldn't they transfer the hatred of the many disciples to them? After a few days of getting along, the Blood Wolf King gradually became more intelligent and was more familiar with Zhong Xiaohua. When it saw Zhong Xiaohua rubbing its head and pointing in the direction they came from, it already understood what he meant. It was just that it was reluctant to leave, so it rubbed its head on Zhong Xiaohua's body and licked Zhong Xiaohua's hand with its tongue. This guy is becoming more and more like the big yellow dog from the Guozhuang house. Zhong Xiaohua thought maliciously. Then, he walked to the back of the carriage and carried Chang'e and the others. He picked up the little yellow mink and the little black dog and placed them in front of his chest. The hundreds of blood wolves and other beasts all growled and prostrated themselves on the ground as if they were worshipping him. Then, they got up, shook off the dust, and left in the direction they came from. Not long after, they all disappeared without a trace. Zhong Xiaohua held the little mink and the little dog in his arms and turned the carriage around. He said with a smile, Okay, the master who sent the guests off has returned. We should go back. At this time, Chen Chen shouted, Where's my little black dog? Give it back to me. Gosh tilde Zhong Xiaohua curled his lips and said, It's clearly mine. When did it become yours? However, as he spoke, he still took out the small black puppy that was not much bigger than a mouse and handed it over. However, the little black puppy that had been sleeping in Chen Chen's arms all this while was not behaving well at this moment. Its eyes were closed and its little head was swaying left and right. Its little nose was sniffing non-stop and its entire body was twisting here and there. Chen Chen did not understand and wondered, could it be that this little black puppy is female? It stuck to Zhong Xiaohua when he hugged it. As he said that, he handed it over to Zhong Xiaohua. Indeed, once the little black dog was in Zhong Xiaohua's hands, its nose stopped twitching and it obediently bent down. Its little head even tried to burrow into Zhong Xiaohua's arms. The other two were also a little dumbfounded. Along the way, Zhong Xiaohua did not pay much attention to the little black dog. It was almost always carried by Chen Chen. How could it be ungrateful when it passed through Zhong Xiaohua's arms? I knew it. This little black dog must be a girl. Chen Chen was very indignant. Fine. Seeing the little black dog like this, Zhong Xiaohua did not hand it over to Chen Chen. There were 2 little mice on the left and right and he could hold as much as he wanted in his arms, so he still put it together with the little mink. Next to the little mink was a small primordial stone that Zhong Xiaohua usually used for cultivation. The carriage traveled for another half an hour and had already arrived at the mouth of the canyon. It was the place where Huang Feng killed the disciples of Wuming Hall that day. At that time, when Zhong Xiaohua escaped, the mouth of the valley was still piled up like a mountain. The bodies of many disciples were casually thrown at the mouth of the valley. At this time, the mouth of the valley was clean. There were only black bloodstains on the ground, scattered long swords, and tattered rags occasionally blown away by the wind, indicating that there had been a heroic moment here. Zhong Xiaohu and the other 2 did not witness it with their own eyes, but with Zhong Xiaohua's narration, they also saw their fellow disciples become food in the mouth of the blood wolf. Naturally, they could empathize with the tragedy at that time. Now that they saw the ground that had long been soaked in blood, they could not help but become solemn. It was just that the mouth of the valley was too clean, which made Zhong Xiaohua a little puzzled. The bodies of so many disciples of Wuming Hall, were they taken away by the people of the fragrance cult? Or were they eaten by the ferocious beasts in the Yulan Grand Canyon? However, Zhong Xiaohua would not ask such questions to Chang'e and Chen Chen. After waiting for a while, she said, "Second brother, it's going to be dusk soon. Do you know the time and route to leave the valley?" Zhong Xiaohu raised his eyes to look at the sun that was still hanging in the west. He nodded and said, "I know. Before we entered the valley, the hall master specially explained everything, especially the matters of entering and exiting the valley. Everyone remembered it by heart. This time is just right. When we reach the dense forest, we should be able to leave." "Good. Second brother, from now on, I am the disciple of the pill repository hall that you saved." After saying that, she jumped into the third carriage and sat obediently with a frightened expression on her face. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua's behavior, Chen Chen almost burst out laughing. "Zhong Xiaohua, the valley is still far away. Why are you pretending so early?" "I'm just practicing. It's been a long time since I tricked people. I'm a little rusty," Zhong Xiaohua said in all seriousness. "Okay, let's go." Zhong Xiaohu patted the elk's buttocks, and the elk pulled the carriage straight out of the Yulan Grand Canyon. Seeing the huge mountain range receding from her side, Zhong Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a little sad. That day, there were nearly 500 disciples who entered the valley. However, when it ended, only 9 of them survived. She wondered what kind of expression the hall master of the pill repository hall, Old Man Zishan, would have on his face if he knew this news. Sigh, let bygones be bygones. Senior brothers, may your souls rest in peace. Zhong Xiaohua stood up and looked back at the valley entrance that was getting narrower and narrower. She secretly prayed in her heart. The Yulan dusk refinement was finally over. -3. Chapter 686. It was still early. When Zhong Xiaohua and the others came out of the valley and came to the open space between the valley and the dense forest, the setting sun was still high in the sky. Zhong Xiaohua pretended to stay in the third carriage. After looking for a long time, she did not see any disciples of the fragrance cult. Could it be that the trial has already passed? Zhong Xiaohua was a little surprised. She counted with her fingers and found that it had only been 20 days. Was 1 month too long? Could it be that the inhibition has been activated in advance? Zhong Xiaohua frowned for a while. Seeing that there was no one around, Zhong Xiaohua flew to Zhong Xiaohu's carriage. Zhong Xiaohu, who was driving the carriage, was surprised. He patted his chest and said, "Xiaohua, your lightness skill is too good. I heard from my master that Master Ou is just SOSO. Pretend, just pretend." Zhong Xiaohua said with a smile, "I didn't see you speak so exaggeratedly at home. Now, why are you so?" Chang'e, who was behind the carriage, asked, "Xiaohua, what was your second brother like at home?" "Nothing, Sister Chang'e. When my second brother was at home, he was a flower in the field. Everyone praised him." Phut, Chen Chen and Chang'e both laughed and said, "We heard your second brother say that, a flower in the field depends on dung." Ah! Zhong Xiaohua was a little dumbfounded. Then she rolled her eyes and was about to speak, but she was interrupted by the blushing Zhong Xiaohu. He said, "Why don't you pretend to be injured in the back? What are you doing here?" Zhong Xiaohua shrugged and said, "There is no one here. Who will see me?" When Chen Chen heard this, he suddenly said, "By the way, Zhong Xiaohua, since you can pretend to be seriously injured, why don't you just pretend to be dead? There's no need to return to the pill-expanding hall. Follow us to Shushin Peak. A few days ago, didn't you ask about your villa master Ou and sister Chiotong? Come with us now. They might be very happy to see you." "Ayo." Zhong Xiaohua slapped her head and said, "That's a good idea. Why didn't I think of it?" Inside the carriage, Chang Ji smiled and said, It's a pity that Xiaohua can't change her appearance. If it's the same as changing her name, she can change into another person. Otherwise, although the fragrant cult is big, it will be seen by the disciples of the Pill Tower Hall. At that time, it would be bad. Zhong Xiaohu also sighed and said, how can it be that easy? Even if she can change into another person, there will be one more person in our Shushan Peak. How can the fragrant cult not know? In fact, Zhong Xiaohua immediately realized that Chen Chen was joking with her. She also said, unless I become one of the disciples who came here for the trial, otherwise, don't mention it. Speaking of the disciples of the Misty Hall, Zhong Xiaohu and the rest were equally sad. They recalled the cheerful voices and laughter of their fellow disciples. These were the elites of the Misty Hall. Now, all of them were buried in the Yulan Grand Canyon. Only the 3 of them managed to return. For the Misty Hall, it was like adding one disaster after another. However, thinking of the rare spiritual herbs in the 4 carriages and the situation in the Misty Hall, they only hoped that the harvest this time could slightly compensate for the loss. Suddenly, Zhong Xiaohua slapped her forehead again and said, I forgot one thing. Oh, forget it. Let's talk about it when I have time to go to Shushan Peak in person. Chen Chen was curious and asked, what is it? Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, I don't know if Sister Qiu Tong is married. If she is, we have to be careful about this matter. Chen Chen was even more puzzled and said, no, Qiu Tong and Oyu Yang are all alone. That's good. Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, I still have the confession letter from Sister Qiu Tong's admirer. After that, she told them about her exploration of the righteous alliance in the past. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but sigh. Needless to say, this disciple of the Misty School must have been buried in the unforgettable annihilation of the Misty School's disciples. If not for Qiu Ju's intentions, this disciple's intentions would have dissipated between heaven and earth. Well, you have to personally pass this letter to Qiu Tong. Chang'e also agreed. To comfort this disciple's soul in heaven, while talking, the 4 carriages had already reached the edge of the dense forest, but the white fog still covered the entire forest. How could they see the way out? Zhong Xiaohua frowned and said, Second brother, do you think the restriction of Twilight Orchid will be closed in advance? When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, his expression changed and he said, this. It's really hard to say. When the 2 people in the carriage heard this, they also walked out. Zhong Xiaohua said, I don't know what you told us when you came, but since it can be opened in advance, it's very likely that it will close in advance. It's been more than 20 days, so it's normal for there to be some changes. Chen Chen said involuntarily, if we can't get out, won't we have to stay here for 5 years? It's said that the disciples who didn't get out in time, even the inner disciples, have never been seen again. Zhong Xiaohua didn't agree with this. He had seen the remarkable power of Huang Feng with his own eyes, and also saw the fall of Huang Feng and He Dian. He roughly knew that these were probably the actions of those 2 in the past. Now, little Huang Feng and little He Dian were in his arms, waiting for him to be their father. How could he and the others follow in the footsteps of others? Zhong Xiaohu looked at the graceful Chang'e on the carriage, and a smile appeared on his lips. He thought to himself, if it's like this, then it's a kind of immortal-like life. Chang'e also understood Zhong Xiaohu's thoughts and nodded slightly at him. Zhong Xiaohu's heart was instantly filled with sweetness. Not to mention the 2 of them, the sun on the western mountain ridge was halfway down. Chen Chen looked at the dense fog in the forest and said in surprise, Senior sister, senior brother, look, the white fog has begun to recede. Zhong Xiaohu and Chang'e reluctantly moved their eyes away from each other and looked into the forest. Sure enough, the milky fog was gradually retreating from the edge of the forest into the forest. The more it retreated, the clearer it became. Fortunately, Zhong Xiaohua also felt relieved. Although it was not necessarily a bad thing to be able to live freely in the Yulan Grand Canyon for 5 years, he still wanted to pass the news of Zhong Xiaohu's survival to the Guozhuang house as soon as possible, so that his parents could live peacefully in their old age. Get ready, Xiaohua. This is the last part of the trip out of the valley, so there isn't much danger. But you still have to be careful, don't fail at the last step. I know, second brother. When we came in, our caravan encountered a lot of accidents. While they were talking, the 4 elks pulling the carriage suddenly panicked. They knocked their hooves and retreated slightly. Zhong Xiaohua frowned and suddenly remembered that when the yellow wind chased the inner disciples of the lingering fragrance peak, it only chased them to the entrance of the valley and stopped, not daring to take half a step forward. The elks were also wild beasts in the Yulan Grand Canyon. How could they reach the edge of the forest? Oh no, if the elks can't pass through the forest, or if they are afraid of the forest, what should we do? While he was thinking, Zhong Xiaohua's heart gave him another warning. His spiritual sense was currently suppressed by the restriction of the fragrant religion and was also absorbed by the silver eye in his left hand. He could only see about 3 meters ahead of him, which was far less effective than when he first started the Yulan Twilight refinement. His heart was on alert, and presumably, danger wasn't far away. Without thinking, Zhong Xiaohua took out several jade talismans from his bosom and crushed them with his hands, throwing them around the 4 carriages. 4 water-like ripples were transmitted from the restriction, and the 4 elks gradually calmed down. However, they were still hesitant as they looked at the forest in front of them. At this moment, the setting sun had already approached the mountain range of the Yulan Grand Canyon. A ray of brilliance streaked across the sky and illuminated the forest. Not long after, a path of light appeared from afar and meandered under everyone's feet. However, this path of light was clearly not as bright as when Zhong Xiaohua and the others had first entered. Now, it was much dimmer. Needless to say, anyone who saw it knew that there wasn't much time left on this path of light. Or perhaps, it wouldn't exist for long, so they needed to pass through it in time. Zhong Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He asked Chang'e and Chen Chen for several silk scarves and other things, and covered the eyes of the elks. They were like the fragrant religion's caravan crossing the mountain stream. The blindfolded elks were much more stable, but in this case, Chang'e and Chen Chen would each need a carriage. This was in line with Zhong Xiaohua's previous plan. In addition, each of them had to drive a carriage, so it was reasonable. Zhong Xiaohua drove the first carriage, followed by Chang'e, Chen Chen, and Zhong Xiaohua, of course, was still at the back. Moreover, he was still standing high on the carriage. He released his divine sense to cover the 4 carriages. The path of light was still calm, strange, and long. After traveling for more than half an hour, they still didn't see any movement. Instead, there were some inexplicable attacks from the dense forest from time to time. They gently hit the restriction that Zhong Xiaohua had previously placed on the carriage. It was unknown whether the attacks were aimed at the group or the elks. Although the attacks were silent and Zhong Xiaohua and the others didn't notice, they were frequent. Not long after, the restriction of the jade talisman was broken. Zhong Xiaohua had to use the jade talisman again. After traveling for more than half of the distance, Zhong Xiaohua's defensive jade talisman had been exhausted. He didn't expect to encounter such a situation. He couldn't bring enough jade talismans with him, so Zhong Xiaohua could only take out primordial stones to absorb the primordial qi and replenish the magic incantation for the 4 carriages. However, the speed of absorption was far slower than the speed of consumption. Seeing that 2 hours were almost up, the true qi in Zhong Xiaohua's body was also exhausted. Seeing that there seemed to be no end to the path of light ahead, Zhong Xiaohua was very anxious. At this time, he understood the feeling of senior brother Chen, the leader of Wuming Hall. Would they die here in the end? While he was thinking, he suddenly heard Zhong Xiaohua say with a smile, "Chang'e, hold on a little longer. I have already seen the light ahead." What tilde hearing this, Zhong Xiaohua almost fell off the carriage. As the saying goes, when you marry a wife, you forget your mother. This sentence is really right. Your brother is so busy behind you, but you don't even say a word of comfort. Your wife is just pretending, but you are so concerned about her. Sigh, Zhong Xiaohua, this guy, he even got jealous over such things. -3. Chapter 687. On the other side of the forest, more than 10 tall horses were carrying more than 10 middle-aged men with bulging temples. They were wandering in the open space about 20 jong in front of the forest. The few of them stood slightly forward and stared at the path of light in the forest that was getting dimmer and dimmer. The vigilance in their eyes also disappeared. However, the few of them tightly pulled on the reins of their horses and were determined not to take a step closer to the forest. One of them laughed and said, "Senior Brother Ma, let's go back. Seeing that the path of light has already collapsed, it is impossible for anyone to come out today. Moreover, looking at the white fog in the forest and the condition of the path of light, I don't think it will appear tomorrow." That Senior Brother Ma nodded and said, "Junior Brother Tan's words are very reasonable. According to my experience, today should be the last day of the Valley Orchid Dusk Refinement Restriction. Tomorrow, we don't have to keep watch." Another said, "Senior Brother Ma has been patrolling this valley for decades. Wasn't it also Senior Brother Ma who noticed the early opening of the Valley Orchid Dusk Refinement? Moreover, the hall also rewarded Senior Brother Ma. Since you think the path of light will not appear tomorrow, it must be so. Alas, this year's Valley Orchid Dusk Refinement is really strange. It opened early and closed early. Counting with my fingers, it has only been 20 days. There is still a long time before the 1-month deadline. Yes, but compared to the tragedy in the valley, this is nothing. In fact, let's not talk about the tragedy in the valley. Even if there was no yellow wind and the beast tide, just the early closing of the Valley Orchid Dusk Refinement would have caused many disciples to die. This tragedy has long been doomed. Not necessarily. The tragedy now is that many of our ordinary disciples have died. Alas, hundreds of people in the Wooming Hall have died without a corpse. Adding the brothers of other halls, the number of people who have lost their lives in the Valley Orchid Dusk Refinement is in the thousands. If the Valley Orchid Dusk Refinement was closed, the number would be even greater. Even the inner disciples wouldn't be able to come out. Your words are wrong. Do you think our Senior Brother Ma has been guarding here for nothing? Didn't he say a few days ago that the restriction at the Valley Orchid Dusk Refinement would be closed? At this time, Senior Brother Ma had a complacent look on his face as he laughed. What a pity, what's the use of knowing the warning signs? This Yulan Grand Canyon is filled with ferocious beasts. Our fragrant religion's disciples have all turned into excrement. That's right. Fortunately, I had already gone through the trial 5 years ago. This is only the outer sect test, so I don't have much confidence. The hall also didn't allow me to enter again. Otherwise, I would also have been buried in the Grand Canyon. Junior Brother Tan's face was filled with lingering fear as he continued, only. He looked around and whispered, "I heard from the inner disciples that many disciples died at the entrance of the valley. Why didn't they clean up the mess in the hall? It's always good to be buried in peace." Junior Marshal Brother Ma smiled but didn't say anything. Another person mocked, "Junior Marshal Brother Tan is kind-hearted. Why don't you go in and collect the body? If you ask me, since you dared to enter the valley, you must be prepared to die." Hehe, to tell you the truth, Junior Brother Tan, I feel that this is. Pat your chest. Don't you feel that the following outer sect test will be much easier? Hee. Junior Marshal Brother Tan only smiled and didn't say anything. Senior Brother Ma scolded, "Junior Brother Fan, what are you talking about? They were all fellow disciples. Even if there was some competition, you can't disregard their lives. No matter how you look at it, you have to grieve for them. Grief. If that's the case, then we should ask the inner disciples to bring out the corpses of our Wooming Hall disciples. Moreover, lingering fragrance peak can't just do nothing." These words were somewhat muttered, and Senior Marshal Brother Ma only pretended not to hear. As the 3 of them talked, the other 10 people stood far away and didn't come forward. Although they didn't have weapons in their hands were very close to the scabbards at their waists. Their eyes glanced at the dense forest from time to time. If there was any abnormality, they could draw their swords in time. Seeing that the dense fog in the dense forest had gathered, the trees and other objects had become blurry. Even the light path out of the forest was not clear. Senior Marshal Brother Ma waved his hand and said, "Let's go. Junior Marshal Brothers, this time's Orchid Dusk Refinement has come to an end. Tomorrow, I will come and take a look and confirm it myself." Okay, Senior Marshal Brother Ma has worked hard. To be honest, when I came here, my hair stood on end. I really didn't want to stay here for a moment. Obviously, all the disciples are in the Death Valley. Why did they make us wait here? Everyone turned their horses around. One of them smiled and said, "It's just to let the other disciples who haven't gone through the trial see that the cult of fragrance won't give up any chance to save the disciples." Moreover, a few days ago, as he was speaking, this person inadvertently turned his head. His face immediately turned pale with fright as he shouted, "Beast tide, beast tide." This shout didn't matter. The other two people immediately panicked. They didn't dare to turn their heads back. With a shake of the reins, they rushed forward and shouted, "Quickly go and report to the hall master." The beast tide really rushed out of the dense forest. The dozen people in the distance had already turned their horses around. When they heard this, they flattered their horses even more, afraid that they would fall behind. Senior Marshal Brother Ma ran a few feet before turning his head back in disbelief. He had been on guard duty here for dozens of years and had never seen any ferocious beasts come out. Not even a small squirrel. Elk tilde Senior Marshal Brother Ma was shocked. This was a ferocious beast from the Great Orchid Prairie. How could it run out? Oh, no! When Senior Marshal Brother Ma looked carefully, he saw that the elk was pulling a carriage behind it. Moreover, there seemed to be a person in the carriage. Although the carriage was far away, it was a model commonly used by the cult of fragrance. Senior Marshal Brother Ma could recognize it at a glance. His mind raced. Could it be that there are still disciples alive? Just as he was thinking, the forest was already shrouded in fog. The light path also collapsed. At this moment, 3 carriages rushed out of the forest. Senior Marshal Brother Ma hurriedly turned his head and shouted, "Senior Marshal Brothers, please stop. There are still disciples alive." Just when Senior Brother Ma turned around, he missed a scene that he would never forget for the rest of his life. After the 3 carriages, the 4th carriage flew out from the top of the 3rd carriage at the moment the thick fog closed with a whoosh and landed diagonally on the empty ground. And a thin and tall figure, like a ghost, dashed out from under the carriage and landed directly on top of the carriage. The sound of the carriage landing was so loud that even Zhong Xiaohu, who was walking in front, was stunned. He immediately turned his head, but when he turned his head, a scene that made his heart ache appeared. He saw that the thin and tall figure had just landed on the carriage. Immediately, his figure swayed twice, and with a pu sound, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Xiaohua. Zhong Xiaohu was shocked and immediately pulled the reins. However, the strangest scene appeared. The elk, whose eyes were covered by a silk scarf, was still energetically pulling the carriage forward. At this moment, its 4 legs were soft. There was no need for Zhong Xiaohu and the others to exert any strength. It immediately stopped and fell to the ground, as if there was 1,000 pounds of weight on it. It couldn't even move. Its 4 limbs twitched a few times, followed by a few howls. A mouthful of blood was spat out from its mouth. It seemed that it was going to die on the spot. Senior Marshal Brother Ma's shout and the sound of Zhong Xiaohua's carriage landing attracted the attention of the people who were running for their lives. A few brave people turned their heads and saw the 4 carriages appear in the open space in front of the forest. Therefore, they gradually pressed down on the horse's head. However, when the elk appeared and died, they were terrified. Who would dare to go forward? Even Senior Marshal Brother Ma, who had called out to everyone, hesitated and stopped 200 feet away. At this moment, how could Zhong Xiaohu have the time to look at the elk? He jumped down in a big stride. He didn't even care about his wife and hurriedly ran to Zhong Xiaohua, who was sitting paralyzed on the carriage with a sallow face. He anxiously asked, "Xiaohua, what's wrong with you? Did you injure your meridians?" Zhong Xiaohua smiled and shook her head. Just as she was about to speak, she felt a sweetness in her throat. A mouthful of blood surged up and she spat it out on the ground. Zhong Xiaohu was shocked. He hurriedly took out a jade bottle from his bosom and poured out a yuhuandan pill. He was about to feed it to Zhong Xiaohua. Zhong Xiaohua hurriedly stopped him and said, "Second brother, it's fine." "What do you mean it's fine? You're already vomiting blood, how can you be fine?" Zhong Xiaohu kicked Zhong Xiaohua and said, "Hurry up and take this jade restoration pill." After spitting out 2 mouthfuls of blood, Zhong Xiaohua felt a lot better. He had just protected the 4 carriages and used up all the zhenqi in his meridians. Moreover, at the last moment, just like when he entered the valley, he didn't have time to get out. If it was a normal day, he would have used his lightness skill to follow. But the moment he flew up, he thought, this carriage is filled with the spiritual herbs that Zhong Xiaohu painstakingly brought back to the Misty Hall. Not to mention that it is something that second brother cares about. Even if it is brought back to the Misty Hall, many disciples of the Misty School will benefit. When he thought of this, he knew that he could no longer escape on his own. Thus, he forcefully circulated his true qi and flew out of the forest with the cart full of spirit herbs. Although he managed to protect the spirit herbs, he also suffered internal injuries. Zhong Xiaohua forced a smile and said, "It's really fine. Second brother, you should take a look at second sister-in-law first. She must have been frightened just now. She is injured." Zhong Xiaohu was stunned for a moment, then he understood. He rubbed Zhong Xiaohua's head and said, "You child, what kind of injuries can she have? She's already telling me that she's alive and kicking. Don't worry about her." After saying that, he was about to personally feed the Yuhuandan pill into Zhong Xiaohua's mouth. Zhong Xiaohua whispered, "Second brother, it's really not necessary. I have other pills here. Moreover, did you forget? Didn't I just pretend to be injured? Isn't this a good opportunity?" Zhong Xiaohu muttered to himself and put the pill into the jade bottle. He was about to stuff it into Zhong Xiaohua's arms and said, "Then quickly take this pill. When you have time, quickly take it. Internal injuries can't be delayed." Zhong Xiaohua's heart warmed. She smiled and said, "It's really not necessary." Look, after saying that, she took out a jade bottle from her bosom and said, "I have other healing pills. They are even better than the Yuhuandan pill." Zhong Xiaohu looked at Zhong Xiaohua's seemingly endless supply of pills and hesitated. He naturally knew that if there was a pill better than the Yuhuandan pill, Zhong Xiaohua would have given it to him. Her words were obviously a lie. Therefore, he glared at her. -3. Chapter 688. Just as Zhong Xiaohua and his brother were pushing the jade rejuvenation pill back and forth, each wanting the other to take it, the people of Wuming Hall in the distance finally came to their senses. Senior brother Ma, junior brother Tan, and the others also braced themselves and came forward. Zhong Xiaohua winked at Zhong Xiaohu. She winked at him and said, "Don't be long-winded, second brother. I have my own way. Just deal with the disciples who are coming. Remember, my name is Ren Xiaoyao and I'm a disciple of Tuodu Hall." Zhong Xiaohu saw that his brother refused to take the pill and sighed in his heart. He put away the jade bottle and turned to Chang'e and others who were about to run over. He said, "It's okay. Ren Xiaoyao is fine." Ren Xiaoyao? Chang'e and Chen Chen also understood. They looked up at the disciples who were approaching and said vaguely, "Oh, that's good." However, they still looked at Zhong Xiaohua with concern and refused to go back. Zhong Xiaohua didn't wipe the blood from the corners of her mouth and just nodded slightly, indicating that they didn't need to worry. At this time, senior brother Ma shouted from afar, "Are you a disciple of our fragrance cult? May I ask which hall you belong to?" It was already dusk and it was hard to see clearly. Zhong Xiaohu walked to the front of the carriage and looked at the dead elk on the ground. He ignored senior brother Ma's shout and just wondered why the elk died here for no reason. Seeing that Zhong Xiaohu ignored them, senior brother Ma and others had to walk forward about 10 feet and then shouted, "The disciple of the hall in front, please say hello." Zhong Xiaohu raised his head at this time and looked at the disciple of Wuming Hall who was more than 10 feet away with contempt. He shouted, "I'm a disciple of Misty Hall. May I know who you are?" Although Zhong Xiaohu called him senior brother, he didn't show the respect of a senior brother and didn't even tell him his name. Hearing that he was a disciple of Misty Hall, senior brother Ma was surprised and blurted out, "A disciple of Misty Hall? How are you still alive?" As soon as he finished speaking, he realized that he had said something wrong and hurriedly urged his horse forward. When he got closer, he looked at the clothes of the four people and cupped his hands. I am Ma Chi, a disciple of Wuming Hall. May I know your name? Zhong Xiaohu didn't seem to like the disciples of the fragrant religion. However, seeing that the disciple was so polite, he returned the greeting and said, I am Zhong Xiaohu from the Misty Hall. These are my two junior sisters. As they spoke, the other disciples also arrived in front of them. A disciple pointed his horsewhip at Zhong Xiaohua and asked, Who is he? When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, she hurriedly struggled to get up and said in a low voice, Senior Martial Brother, please no. I am an alchemy apprentice from the Tianmu Peak of the Dan Sprouting Hall. My name is Ren Xiaoyao. A few days ago, I was chased by a ferocious beast. Fortunately, this senior martial brother of the Misty Hall saved me. Until today, I followed them out of the Orchid Valley. Pill Tower Hall? The dozens of people present were even more surprised. The man with the horsewhip frowned and asked, Are you really a disciple of the Pill Tower Hall? Zhong Xiaohua asked curiously, Is this a good disguise? This is strange. In this Orchid Valley evening refinement, Shuyu Hall, Chenkuan Hall and others were all wiped out. Even my Wuming Hall only had a few disciples escape. Your Pill Tower Hall had several people escape before. Today, you appear again. This is really puzzling. When Zhong Xiaohua heard this, she felt a little relieved. It seemed that Lu Chaoxian and others had already escaped safely. It was not wrong for her to take the risk to lead the Yellow Wind away. At this time, a short and fat man next to him said, Is there anyone else from the Misty Hall alive? Why are you not together after escaping? Who else came back alive? When Zhong Xiaohu heard this, he was overjoyed and asked eagerly. Senior Brother Ma said with a smile, A few days ago, only one disciple escaped alive. It seems that his surname is Chen. He is the only disciple who escaped alive in more than 10 days. We thought he was the luckiest one. Senior Brother Chen? Zhong Xiaohu looked at the surprised expressions of Chang'e and Chen and asked unconsciously. He didn't say much. He only said that his surname is Chen. We have sent him back. You can ask him when you go back to Shushan Peak. Senior Brother Ma looked up at the dense forest which had been filled with dense fog and said with a smile, Junior Brother Zhong is luckier. Today is the last day of the Orchid Valley evening refinement. If you go back tomorrow, you can't even find the way out of the valley. After that, he waved his hand and a whistling arrow rushed into the air. It was the daily communication signal of the fragrance cult. Then, a slightly older disciple said, Junior Brother Ma, give your horses to them first. Let's leave this place first and wait until we arrive at the station of the front hall. Senior Brother Ma and the other two jumped off their horses and led them to Zhong Xiaohu. Another person said to Zhong Xiaohua, Ren Xiaoyao, come here and get on the horse with me. He didn't care about Zhong Xiaohua's injury at all. Zhong Xiaohu shook his head and said, I'm sorry, Senior Brother Ma. Please give us 4 horses. We still have to take these 4 carriages back to Shushan Peak. Carriages? Why take carriages back? Senior Brother Ma was a little puzzled. It was not easy for you to escape. Why do you need carriages? Zhong Xiaohu didn't explain and shook his head. In the carriages are the spiritual herbs picked by the disciples of the Misty Hall. I have to take them back to Shushan Peak. This. Senior Brother Ma was a little hesitant. The older disciple said impatiently, Junior Brother Quan, give your horses to them. They will arrive at the station in a while. Junior Brother Quan had no choice but to jump off his horse and lead his horse to Zhong Xiaohua's carriage. Zhong Xiaohu rushed over and tied the horse to the carriage. Then he went back and settled the 3 carriages. Then he remembered something and pointed to the second carriage. By the way, I forgot that in addition to saving Ren Xiaoyao of the pill-expanding hall, we also met a female disciple who was about to die. However, I don't know which hall she belongs to. I guess she may be an inner disciple. Ah! Everyone turned pale with fright. They didn't care about the dense forest and jumped off their horses. The older disciple took the lead and lifted the curtain of the carriage. Under the dim light, he looked at the female disciple lying on the carriage. At this time, the female disciple's whole body was bandaged. How could he see anything? The older disciple didn't dare to confirm and said hesitantly, "Junior brother Zhong, how do you know she is an inner disciple?" Zhong Xiaohu sneered, "Except for inner disciples, which hall can let female disciples enter? In such a dangerous time, who can stay alive?" The senior disciple suddenly came to his senses. He no longer hesitated. He waved his hand, and another whistling arrow whizzed into the air. Then, a huge signal appeared in the air. It was an emergency signal that was several times more advanced than the signal of senior brother Ma. Then, the senior disciple instructed, "Quickly, the senior sister of the inner court is heavily injured and cannot be delayed. I'll take a few people to drive a carriage and send her to Lingering Fragrance Peak overnight. You guys escort these junior brothers back to First Faith Peak." After saying that, he was about to leave when Zhong Xiaohu shouted, "How can you do that?" The older disciple was stunned and said unhappily, "Why not? Lingering Fragrance Peak has an order. Whenever an inner disciple comes out, we must inform them immediately and escort them back to Lingering Fragrance Peak overnight. Moreover, this senior sister is seriously injured." Zhong Xiaohu smiled and said, "Senior brother, of course you can escort her back to Lingering Fragrance Peak. But I won't lend you this carriage." Junior brother Quan, who was standing at the side, became anxious and berated loudly, "You brat, this is the senior sister of Lingering Fragrance Peak. If anything happens to her, can you, a little disciple of Misty Hall, bear the responsibility? Your carriage only has some spiritual herbs. Do you think we will be greedy?" Zhong Xiaohu shook his head, "I don't know if you are greedy or not. First, this senior sister's life is not in danger. Second, the things in the carriage were exchanged with the lives of dozens of disciples of Misty Hall. There is no reason for me to give it to others for free." Junior brother Quan was a little angry. He was angry at this disciple's ignorance and lack of sense of organization. "So be it." The senior disciple thought for a while and said, "Lingering Fragrance Peak and Shushan Peak are not in the same direction, but we can go together for a while. Let's go together for the time being. When the carriage of Wuming Hall comes, we will escort the senior sister to Lingering Fragrance Peak. Junior brother Tan, you ride a fast horse. Go to the station quickly and find the best carriage." "Yes, senior brother." Junior brother Tan jumped on the horse and hurried away. "Let's go, junior brother Zhong. You take care of your own carriage. I will drive this one." The senior disciple jumped on the carriage carrying the female disciple and said, "Okay." Zhong Xiaohu was speechless and let Chang'e and Chen Chen get on the other two carriages. At this time, the senior disciple saw Zhong Xiaohua sitting in the last carriage and said softly, "Junior brother Quan, you don't need to drive the carriage. Take this disciple of Pill Expanding Hall to Baiyu Peak." Hearing this, junior brother Quan was very unhappy, but he couldn't say anything. He had to take the reins from a disciple and scolded Zhong Xiaohua impatiently, "Let's go, little pharmacist. I will send you back to Pill Expanding Hall." Zhong Xiaohu was anxious and said, "He is injured. Let him sit in the carriage. When the carriage comes, it will not be too late to send him away." The senior disciple also said disdainfully, "No, it's just a minor injury. He can hold on for a while. It's only a day's journey to Baiyu Peak by taking a shortcut. There is a place to rest in the middle. We will arrive at noon tomorrow. The earlier we leave, the earlier we can go back to Pill Expanding Hall. Moreover, Baiyu Peak is not in the same direction as Lingering Fragrance Peak and Shushan Peak." Well, Zhong Xiaohu didn't know what to say. He really didn't want his injured brother to go back with a bumpy journey, but he had no reason to keep Zhong Xiaohua. Zhong Xiaohua stood up with difficulty and cupped one hand in the other before his chest. "Senior brother Zhong, thank you for saving my life. When I return to Baiyu Peak and recover from my injury, I will go to Shushan Peak to thank you for your kindness. Then, well, junior brother Ren, take care." Zhong Xiaohu was reluctant to part with him. Chang'e and Chen Chen also looked at him eagerly. Zhong Xiaohua nodded to the three people. Junior brother Quan was already impatient and said, "Get on quickly. If you are late, you won't even be able to make it to the camp." Zhong Xiaohua climbed onto the horse's back with some difficulty. Junior brother Quan shook the reins, and the horse let out a low neigh before galloping away. Zhong Xiaohua looked back at his second brother with great nostalgia. He also knew that even though they were both in the incense cult, it would be extremely difficult for him to see his brother again unless there was a special reason. -3. Chapter 689. The next day, it was a gloomy day. 2 horses were galloping on a small mountain path, with the tall and skinny Zhong Xiaohua sitting behind them. At this time, Zhong Xiaohua's face was still as pale as gold, no different from the day before. Senior brother Quan, who was faster than Zhong Xiaohua by 3 or 4 horse lengths, looked back from time to time. Looking at Zhong Xiaohua, who was lagging behind, he scolded impatiently, "Can't you be faster? It's almost noon and there's still a distance to Baiyu Peak. Even if you take a shortcut, you won't be able to get any closer." The senior disciple of Wuming Hall was right. This was indeed a shortcut, but this shortcut was abnormally rugged and bumpy. It was basically using difficulty to exchange for distance. Zhong Xiaohua had just been injured, how could he travel like this? 2 hours ago, he had spat out a mouthful of blood and did not dare to increase the speed of his horse. Senior brother Quan saw this and changed from urging him to nagging. Zhong Xiaohua looked at him coldly and did not reply. He carefully steered the horse and picked a stable path to travel. Around midnight last night, he and senior brother Quan had arrived at Wuming Hall's outpost. Senior brother Quan didn't care whether he was dead or alive. He simply threw him into a small hut and went to sleep. It seemed like he was very dissatisfied with the task of escorting Zhong Xiaohua. When Zhong Xiaohua reached the hut, he did not intend to take any elixirs. He originally wanted to use his injury to hide it from the disciples of Pill Expansion Hall. If he took the blood-replenishing elixir and stopped his injury, wouldn't he have failed in his plan? But when he checked his meridians, he suddenly found that his meridians were recovering steadily. He did not know where the thing in his meridians came from, but it was repairing the damaged parts bit by bit. Even when he checked his internal injuries, there was a mysterious force that was gradually repairing them. What's going on? Zhong Xiaohua saw that the speed of the repair was even faster than the Yuhuandan pill. She was completely at a loss. Well, it could only be described as being at a loss. Zhong Xiaohua really did not know how to deal with it. She could only watch helplessly as her meridians were mended and she fell asleep. When he woke up the next day and checked his meridians, he found that almost half of them had been repaired. It was more effective than the Yuhuandan pill that Zhong Xiaohu and Chang'e took. Well, I was still thinking about taking pills. Looks like there's no need for that now. Zhong Xiaohua laughed at herself. I still wanted to use the meridian nourishing pill to transform my meridians. Looking at the recovery of my meridians, the meridian nourishing pill is no match for it. I might as well save it. Alas, what a miserable person. The pills that I worked so hard to refine are not suitable for me at all. Isn't this purely making a wedding dress for others? Seeing that senior brother Quan was rushing with all his strength, Zhong Xiaohua was actually willing to do so. He did not want Bai Yefeng to think that his injuries had been mostly healed. Then, the blood he spat out would have been in vain. However, this mountain path was indeed not suitable for people who were seriously injured, let alone galloping. Even if he had the Yuhuandan pill, which was a panacea for healing injuries, he still could not prevent his injuries from worsening. At this time, Zhong Xiaohua almost suspected the sinister intentions of the senior disciple of Wuming Hall. After another 2 hours, it was already past noon. The red clouds in the sky were low, and there were even a few rays of sunlight piercing through. It was very dull. Seeing that there was a tall mountain in front of them after turning a corner, senior brother Quan's face showed a trace of a smile. He looked back at Zhong Xiaohua, who was already 10 horse lengths behind, and said with a smile, "Well, we've arrived at your hometown." After that, he still ignored Zhong Xiaohua and galloped straight to the front of the mountain. Before he got close, he heard someone shouting on the side of the road, "Excuse me, is this senior brother from Wuming Hall?" Senior brother Quan was not surprised. He immediately reined in his horse and laughed loudly, I am Quan Bully, a disciple of Wooming Hall. A disciple of Pill Tower Hall holding a long sword came out from the side of the road. He came in front of Quan Bully's horse and bowed respectfully. Senior brother Quan, what can I do for you to come to Bai Yefeng? While they were talking, Zhong Xiaohua, who was lagging behind, also caught up. Seeing a disciple of Pill Tower Hall on the side of the road, she was surprised and stopped her horse. Her chest tightened and she spat out a small stream of blood. This is... The disciple of Pill Tower Hall obviously did not know Zhong Xiaohua. Quan Bully was a little surprised when he heard this. He felt something was wrong last night, but he could not tell what it was. He had been on the road since dawn, so he did not pay attention to it. At this time, when he heard the disciple of Pill Tower Hall ask such a question, his mind unconsciously lit up. Of course, the person riding behind him, who looked tired, was not wearing the uniform of Pill Tower Hall. No wonder he felt awkward. It was dark last night, so he did not notice it. Quan Bully could not help but have a trace of vigilance. He scolded, Ren Xiaoyao. Are you a medicine boy of Pill Tower Hall? Zhong Xiaohua was speechless. She straightened her back and said snappily, what's the point of pretending to be a medicine boy of Pill Tower Hall? She then cupped her hands and said to the disciple of Pill Tower Hall, Senior brother, I am the medicine boy of head Chen Fengxiao of Qianmu Peak. My name is Ren Xiaoyao. I went to participate in the Orchid Dusk Refinement and just escaped with my life. Orchid Dusk Refinement? You? The disciple of Pill Tower Hall felt a little incredulous. Then, he looked at Quan Bully. Quan Bully thought for a while and said, this guy really came out of the Orchid Grand Canyon. I can guarantee this. But, at this point, he did not continue speaking. Zhong Xiaohua sneered and turned to the disciple of Pill Tower Hall. I followed Lu Chaoxian and other senior brothers out of the canyon, but later I was chased by fierce beasts. This time, before Zhong Xiaohua finished speaking, the disciple of Pill Tower Hall interrupted Zhong Xiaohua in surprise. He pointed at her and shouted, You are Ren Xiaoyao. Yes, Ren Xiaoyao, I know it's you. Haha, you risked your life to lead the fierce beast away. The disciple seemed a little inarticulate as he spoke. Hey! Quan Bully's face froze when he heard this. He glanced at Zhong Xiaohua, but immediately relaxed. He cupped his hands and said to the disciple of Pill Tower Hall, So, this junior brother is a disciple of your Pill Tower Hall? Yes, this junior brother should be Ren Xiaoyao. That's good, then I'll leave him to you. I'll go back to Wooming Hall to report. Then, the disciple of Pill Tower Hall could not say anything. He turned his horse and headed in one direction. The disciple of Pill Tower Hall behind him was taken aback, and then shouted, Senior brother, did you go the wrong way? That direction is to Lingering Fragrance Peak, this direction is to Dragon Head Peak. It was a pity that Quan Bully had already gone far away, and no one knew if these words had reached his ears. Hearing the senior brother of Pill Tower Hall remind Quan Bully, Zhong Xiaohua finally understood that the reason for rushing here last night and today was not for anything else, but for the inner court female disciple that she had saved. At this time, the senior brother of Pill Tower Hall came forward and cupped his hands. Junior brother Ren, I'm Li Chengxiu, a disciple of the Pill Department of White Mountain Peak. Junior brother is famous. Haha, although there's no public praise, but in private, all the disciples admire you. Zhong Xiaohua reluctantly cupped her hands and coughed. It's nothing. Cough cough. Seeing this, Li Chengxiu hurriedly took out a jade bottle and handed it over. Junior brother Ren, could it be that you've taken all the elixirs? These are some blood coagulation pills, I don't know if junior brother needs them. Please accept them. Seeing this, Zhong Xiaohua's heart warmed. She waved her hand and said, Thank you, senior brother. This is an internal injury, the blood coagulation pills probably won't work. I appreciate senior brother's kindness. As she spoke, a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of her mouth. Li Chengxiu hurriedly said, Junior brother, wait a moment, I'll get the carriage to come down. Without waiting for Zhong Xiaohua to speak, she sent out a signal. Then she smiled and said, Junior brother, get off the horse and wait for a moment. The carriage will come in a while. You're injured so badly, it's not suitable for you to ride a horse. Zhong Xiaohua had a smile on her face. She thought for a moment and said, "Senior brother Li, I think it's better to go forward. I've been rushing here for half a day, a little bit of time doesn't matter." "Oh, junior brother's words make sense." Li Chengxiu nodded and said, "The hall master has ordered that all the disciples who escaped from the Orchid Dusk must go to 100 Herb Hall. Junior brother, come with me." After he finished speaking, he pulled out a horse from the side and leaped onto it. Then, he led Zhong Xiaohua forward. As they walked, they heard Zhong Xiaohua ask, "Senior brother Li, I remember that when we came to White Mountain Peak before, our pill hall didn't set up any sentries at the foot of the mountain." Now, Li Chengxiu smiled and said, "Isn't it because of the Orchid Dusk?" Then there was some fear on her face and she said, "This time, more than 500 people from our pill hall were buried in the belly of the beasts. Although I don't know the number of people from the other halls, basically no one was able to come out alive. It caused the various peaks to be in a state of panic, fearing that some beast would rush out of the Orchid Grand Canyon. Not only are there sentries at the foot of each mountain, even Wuming Hall has set up stations all over the sect. If there's any movement at any of the halls, they can provide support." With that, she curiously asked, "Junior brother, I want to ask, I heard that the beast was very fierce, how did you escape with your life?" Zhong Xiaohua had already prepared the answer to this question. She smiled and said, "Senior brother, I only know a little bit of martial arts. At that time, it was critical and I only wanted to use my Qinggong to escape as far as possible, so that I could lead the invisible beast away and let senior brother Lu and the others escape. I ran until everything turned dark and I didn't know where I ran to. Later, I was saved by the senior brothers of the Misty Hall and followed them out of the Grand Canyon. Think about it, with my martial arts, even the inner and outer disciples can't deal with the beast. How can I be sure? It's just pure luck and good character." Li Chengxiu was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect Zhong Xiaohua to say so. He unconsciously gave a thumbs up and said, "Junior brother Ren, you are benevolent and righteous." But in her heart she secretly said, "Sure enough, he is a young man who just came to spread the incense sect. He doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Alas, it can be said that fortune favors fools." -3. Chapter 690. Not long after, Zhong Xiaohua and Li Chengxiu came across a carriage coming down from the mountain. Zhong Xiaohua did not decline and boarded the carriage, still looking sickly. On the Bayou Peak, inside the Pill Repository Hall, everything was the same as before. There were absolutely no cries of grief as Zhong Xiaohua had imagined. Every disciple she encountered was in a hurry and did not even look at Zhong Xiaohua, who was in the carriage. It was as if nothing had happened. When the carriage arrived at the 100 Herb Hall, Zhong Xiaohua alighted. Li Chengxiu smiled and said, "Junior brother Ren, wait here. I will go and report. The hall master will definitely reward you later." Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, "I hope so." Li Chengxiu turned and entered the courtyard. Inside the 100 Herb Hall, Elder Zishan was frowning and drinking tea. He seemed to have some difficult matters to settle. When he heard someone report, he casually called them in. Li Chengxiu entered the room and said respectfully, "Congratulations, Hallmaster. Another disciple from our Pill Repository Hall who participated in the Twilight Orchid refinement has returned safely." Hey! Elder Zishan was stunned. He raised his eyebrows and said, "This fellow is quite lucky to be able to return alive. I thought there were only 8 people. Oh, what kind of spiritual herbs did he bring back?" "This." Li Chengxiu was a little hesitant and said, "This disciple is seriously injured and was escorted back by the Wuming Hall's disciples. It seems like he did not bring the carriage back." The spiritual herbs. When Elder Zishan heard this, he laughed coldly and said, "Since he did not pick any spiritual herbs, it means that he did not complete the mission. According to the past, he would be punished. However, it is different this time. It is already good that he managed to escape with his life, so there will be no punishment. Go and let him return early so that he can recuperate." Then, he waved his hand and sent Li Chengxiu out. Li Chengxiu was a little anxious and said, "This Hall Master, this disciple is Ren Xiaoyao from Tianmu Peak." Tianmu Peak? Ren Xiaoyao? Elder Zishan was stunned and said unhappily, "Is he very famous? Isn't he just Chen Fengxiao's subordinate? Is there a need for me to know him? This Chen Fengxiao is really lucky. The 9 survivors are all from Tianmu Peak. Hey! Ren Xiaoyao seems to have some impression of him." Elder Purple Herb looked at Li Chengxiu and said, "If you have anything to say, just say it. I'll pardon you." Li Chengxiu cupped his hands and said, "Sir Hall Master, this Ren Xiaoyao is the Ren Xiaoyao mentioned by Lu Chaoxian and the others who escaped from the Yulan Grand Canyon." Ao tilde Old Man Zishan slapped his bald head and said with a smile, "Now I remember the name of this Ren Xiaoyao. Isn't he the prospective son-in-law that was recruited from Rejuvenation Valley this year? No wonder his name sounded so familiar. Why would he go to the Yulan Grand Canyon?" Soon after, he changed his expression and said, I thought he was just an ordinary disciple. Since he was willing to sacrifice himself to save the other disciples, not to mention his martial arts, his moral character is also good. He is a loyal disciple of our Pill Repository Hall and is worthy of praise. Oh, call him in first. I'll ask him." Li Chengxiu wiped the faint sweat on his head, lowered his head, and went out to call Zhong Xiaohua in. Seeing Zhong Xiaohua walk in, Elder Zishan slowly stood up and said with a smile, "Ren Xiaoyao, you're very good." Zhong Xiaohua hurriedly bowed and said, "Greetings, Sir Hall Master. No need to be so polite." Elder Zishan nodded and pointed to the chair next to him, saying, "Have a seat. I'm an old friend of Rejuvenation Valley's Valley Master Nai. You've been here for a long time, but I haven't had the chance to meet you." Zhong Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. He lowered his head and said, "I'm now a disciple of the Pill Repository Hall and a subordinate of Sir Hall Master. I don't dare to think about anything else." Elder Zishan stared blankly for a moment, then laughed heartily, "Good. Ren Xiaoyao, I like hearing these words of yours. I've been reluctant to meet you all this time, and this is one of my misgivings. I hope you can understand." You should sit down. This Yulan evening refinement really wasn't easy for you. Now that you've been seriously injured, if you don't have a seat at my 100 Herb Hall, wouldn't that disappoint the brothers who enter the valley in the future?" Zhong Xiaohua said in a low voice, "Deference is no substitute for obedience." "Thank you, Sir Hall Master." After he finished speaking, he coughed twice and some blood flowed out. Seeing this, Elder Zishan's expression couldn't help but change slightly. He asked, "How are your injuries?" Zhong Xiaohua hurriedly said, "It's nothing serious. There shouldn't be any problems after a few months of recuperation." Elder Zishan waved his hand and said to the disciple standing by the side, "Go. Take a bottle of the blood coagulation pills, blood replenishing pills, and other healing pills in the hall and bring them to Ren Xiaoyao." The disciple accepted the order and left. Zhong Xiaohua smiled and said, "I've just finished my medicine. Many thanks for Hall Master's generous gift." Elder Zishan smiled and said, "It's no matter. However, since you've said this old man wants to talk about you. I just heard that you've won quite a few medicinal pills at Tianmu Peak. Why did you exchange them for medicinal herbs? How can you do such a loss-making business?" Zhong Xiaohua said shamefully, "I've just arrived and haven't seen so many medicinal herbs. I was pleasantly surprised and couldn't help but exchange them. Only now do I regret it. If I had paid a visit to Sir Hall Master earlier and received Sir's guidance, how could I have done such a foolish thing?" Elder Zishan chuckled and said, "You've just arrived at the Pill Opening Hall. Why did you suddenly run to the Yulan Grand Canyon to participate in the Yulan evening refinement?" Zhong Xiaohua shook his head and said, "I don't know about this. I only said that I was on the list, so I went." Elder Zishan nodded. "I reckon that Vice Hall Master Shu knows that your martial arts are outstanding, so he sent you. It's also thanks to Vice Hall Master Shu's discerning eyes. Otherwise, our Pill Opening Hall would have been completely wiped out. Not a single disciple would have been able to come out." Immediately, he said with a beaming smile, I heard from Lu Chaoxian and the others that they followed you to pick the 100-year-old ice spirit grass and luckily escaped with their lives. I just don't know if you've completed the task assigned by Vice Hall Master Shu? Zhong Xiaohua's heart stirred, and immediately became panicked. He hurriedly stood up and said, I'm incompetent. I searched for a long time but still couldn't find it. I originally wanted to go further to pick it, but I encountered a great change. I didn't dare to go further and only wanted to quickly leave the valley with my senior martial brothers. However, I couldn't complete Vice Hall Master Shu's order. Once I've recovered, I'll go to Vice Hall Master Shu and ask for forgiveness. That won't be necessary. Elder Zishan took charge and said, although you didn't pick the 100-year-old ice spirit grass, you saved several carriages of medicinal herbs from my pill opening hall. This can be considered as atoning for your crimes. If Vice Hall Master Shu comes looking for you, just say that I said it and there's no need to punish me. Zhong Xiaohua smiled faintly and said, if Vice Hall Master Shu comes looking for me, I'll definitely tell him. Although her smile was very gentle, Zhong Xiaohua was disdainful in her heart. Vice Hall Master Shu actually dared to instruct Lu Lihong to kill her. How could she let him off easily? Elder Zishan drank a mouthful of tea. At this moment, the disciples in the hall also brought a few bottles of medicinal pills. Zhong Xiaohua put them in her arms and expressed her gratitude to Elder Zishan. Sure enough, Elder Zishan was just casually listening. However, when he heard about the Misty Hall, his eyes lit up and he asked, disciples of the Misty Hall? They saved you. Oh, and they even saved an inner disciple? Zhong Xiaohua was puzzled and said, yes, when I woke up, there were 3 disciples of the Misty Hall. There was no one else beside me. It must be them. Moreover, when they saved that inner disciple, I saw it with my own eyes. They said that the girl was an inner disciple. I don't know anything. Then, what do you think of the attitude of these disciples towards you? Zhong Xiaohua was even more taken aback. He said carefully, it's all right. Although they don't talk much, they're very polite. They saved my life, so how can I be picky? I was thinking of waiting a few months to recover and go to the Shushan Peak to thank them. Ha ha ha, Elder Zishan laughed and said, your idea is good, but it's a little difficult to realize. Even if I want to go to the Shushan Peak, I have to get the consent of the Lingxiang Peak. Zhong Xiaohua looked guilty and said, then I can only wish them success. Elder Zishan stared at Zhong Xiaohua for a long time and seemed to have made a decision. He said with a smile on his face, well, Ren Xiaoyao, it's not easy for you. Although you didn't pick the herbs, you saved the lives of 8 people. Oh, I almost forgot, there was also the life of an inner disciple. Moreover, you brought back 4 carriages of herbs for the pill sprouting hall. You can be considered as the #1 contributor to this Valley Orchid evening refinement. Not to mention other things, if the pill sprouting hall doesn't reward you, it will make our brothers feel bitterly disappointed. You can go and recuperate. After a while, I will arrange a task for you as a reward. Zhong Xiaohua was stunned and said, I don't dare to be praised by the hall master. It's what I should do. Well, you don't have to say any more. Go back to the Tianmu Peak as soon as possible. Taking care of your body is the most important thing. Old Man Purple Ginseng had an unhappy look on his face as he said, clearly distinguishing between reward and punishment is the foundation of this old man's conduct. Since you can perform meritorious service, this old man will reward you. Zhong Xiaohua immediately stood up and said respectfully, thank you, Hallmaster. Old Man Zishan smiled and waved his hand to signal Zhong Xiaohua to leave. Then, he picked up his teacup and took a sip happily, as though he had just resolved a very important matter. When Zhong Xiaohua sat in the carriage, they immediately arrived at Bai Yefeng. Inside an exquisite little house, Vice Hall Master Shu looked at the person in front of the hall in astonishment and said, are you sure? Ren Xiaoyao actually came back alive? The disciple nodded, that's right. I heard from Li Chengxiu, who was on duty at the foot of the mountain today, that he had already escorted Ren Xiaoyao back to Tianmu Peak. -3. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.